Yeah, no, I just had two microphones here. I don't know what that's in reference to, but obviously was originally on
Yeah,
the wrong
yeah,
one. Okay.
yeah. I think. All right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Before I got on this call, I was thinking a lot about like demographics because we're both really big kind of Frank Zappa fans, I think, from watching your videos. But also I think we both really love Firebend and Boss Ben Frossen, Uh
Yeah. Okay.
so I was just thinking like that's a really weird demographic.
That
Like
is, yeah. I don't know how many people would be like captured by those things. Yeah,
like
that's
I think it's two people.
possibly. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But it's good. I think we disagree on a lot of things too. Although, in one of your I guess for people who are listening to this, I guess we could give it some context that I wouldn't say I was arguing with you in the comments, but I just kept bringing up some weird stuff and like started this conversation.
well, I guess,
Um,
I mean, yeah,
but
so it started because I think the first interaction we had was because I had said some dismissive things about uh, people who claim to be skeptics. And
yes,
that was
that's
our
right. Yeah,
initial conversation. I
I
frame it in
still
that way because
I
I
hadn't
don't.
yet
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I hadn't yet seen your video where you talk about skeptics being annoying. So, so, so I didn't think you hated skepticism that much during the comments, but then I watched that video and I was like, oh, this guy really doesn't like skepticism.
I don't frame it in those terms because I think that I find skepticism fascinating. What I find slightly annoying, but I mean, you should also bear in mind that like I'm actually a lot more diplomatic about this than it might seem in some of my videos because I always try to present my position in like the strongest terms possible because that's more entertaining, I think. Um,
Yeah,
but the
I
thing
agree
that
with
I
that.
no,
Yeah.
what I specifically find irritating is people who claim to endorse skepticism as a position. I think so. Skepticism as a position, I think, is a fascinating challenge. I just don't think it's something you can actually endorse. And when you try to endorse it, you end up engaging in all sort. What I think ends up happening is you end up essentially just stating what are really quite trivial views, but in bizarre language. Um, and I should say that when I say skepticism, I mean specifically uh, suspension of judgment. Um, so
Yeah.
just to be
Yeah,
clear about
it's
that.
interesting. Yeah, I wanted to talk about, kind of two things. I wanted to talk about skepticism,
Mm.
but I also wanted to talk about how mysticism and Eastern philosophy, which is something you're probably less familiar with, uh, kind of it gets rid of some problems I think that you've listed with the psychological component of skepticism, which is that I mean, there's a lot of things in Zen, for example, where you know it's all about doing things that we would consider to be like like the most practical, mundane things, but actually sort of suspending judgment while you're doing those things. So
Hmm.
it's not it's you might be doing something that from the third person point of view people would just say, well, that's just manual labor. But the whole point of it is that the first person perspective of that is just complete wonder about the event. You're not saying that the event has been parameter. You've put it in this box. You're seeing the first person sort of engagement with the event is outside of any box. See, now you'd see it and you'd say, well, that's just manual labor. It's like clearly defined. I know what it is. But when you're engaged with it, if you're engaged with it in a particular way, it's just an utter mystery. I don't know what it really is. but you've said these activities equal manual labor, but that's just not what Zen's trying to do. It's trying to actually sort of disabuse you of those conventional labels.
Okay.
So when you say, well, it's psychologically impossible to do normal activities while suspending judgment, I mean, that's kind of just the whole point of Zen practice, is to suspend judgment while doing what people would consider utterly mundane activities.
All right. Yeah, I mean, so...
And it's about that psychological shift is, that's sort of the essential kind of quality of what you're doing.
I wonder, so part of the... One problem I have here is that when I talk about suspension of judgment, like, I'm framing that in terms of, descriptive propositions. And it seems like from what you've said, right, Zen just doesn't frame anything in those terms. At least from the point of view of Zen practice. So, I mean, it's sort of difficult for me to... I don't know how to respond to it because I can't make sense of what you're talking about. I
can try to put it in more Western. Yeah, I can put it in more Western sort of, I can phrase it in a more westernized philosophical language. So, sort of just like when we talk about sort of descriptive things and tacit things, and just that, like, so, for example, like, I mean, do you think that this is a controversial kind of claim that, like, so an expert in something, they might have sort of tacit knowledge that sort of extends beyond what's descriptively documented? So meaning, like, you could have, like, maybe a great artist, let's say, to where what we have in books about how to create art of that kind doesn't really capture the full extent of that, master painters, like what they can do, like what they know how to do, might just not be documented in descriptive terminology. But they still have that knowledge. They still know how to do it.
Yeah.
And they can perform it on command, but it's just not, they've never documented it and nobody's just taken the time to do it. Yep. So, like, you would admit, I think, that's something that happens, right?
Yeah.
So tacit knowledge it's important. I mean, you don't just want a surgeon who knows all the descriptive things that he got from medical school. You also want him to have 20 years of experience dealing with sort of spontaneous scenarios that he has to react to, and, like, have that sort of muscle memory built in.
Yep.
I mean, we're not disputing that's relevant in the world, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, and also I don't think that's like outside the bounds of, Western philosophy. I think it's completely acknowledged that tacit knowledge is a thing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I don't really see how that goes any way towards solving the issue. So, I mean, okay, like, let me just maybe state what the problem is as I see it. So, okay, so first of all, when I talk about suspending judgment, right, again, maybe I should be clear what I mean about this. So an example of a case where, like, I suspend judgment would be, I don't know, let's say somebody asks me, has the universe always existed, or did the universe come into existence at some point? Or, like, maybe not the universe, because maybe there's a multiverse, but, like, has something always existed, or was there a point at which something popped into existence? Well, to that, I just have absolutely no idea. I have no inclination one way or the other. I just can't see, like, any grounds on which to make a judgment there. So I just suspend judgment about that. Now, the skeptic, at least as I understand the position, wants to extend that state of mind to every domain. And so when you talk about the example of the doctor, the problem I'm seeing is, well, I mean, first of all, if you're genuinely suspending judgment about everything, then the doctor's going to I mean, they're not going to be making any judgment about whether there's somebody on the table, about whether, if they use the knife on a particular body part, that's going to, I don't know, cut into the body part or just make the knife explode. So, like, I mean, I don't see how they would be able to perform any action if they're genuinely in that state. Now, it might be the case that we don't want to talk
doesn't
about...
that kind of... Oh, sorry. No, finish your point.
So yeah, I was just going to say, look, I mean, it might be like, we don't want to say that the Doctor has like full belief. I mean, I'm kind of happy to just talk about, like, if somebody's making a judgment, I'm happy to say, okay, that's a belief. If it's a judgment about like the way the world is, or if they're somehow representing a way the world is, I'm going to say, okay, that's a belief. But maybe not. Maybe like belief is it kind of carries too many connotations that we don't want. But in some sense, like, it seems like you have to represent the world as being some sort of way in order to act in it. And so, yeah, that's the issue I have.
But so now, do you think that acting in the world is sort of follows from... I mean, let's just use the word belief, because we've been, even if we don't like that word, or you or I don't, or whoever doesn't like it. I'm just saying, like, do you think that when people act in the world, that's following from what they believe, or that acting just happens?
I wouldn't say it follows from it, because it seems like you're going to need other states in order to motivate action. Like, you're going to have desires, for instance, or something like desire. Again, maybe we don't want to use the term desire, but yeah, I mean, belief in itself doesn't. It sort of seems to be kind of inert. Like, you have to have some sort of goal, and then, given that you have a particular desire or a particular goal, and given you have certain beliefs about the way the world is, you can then do stuff to attempt to bring about that goal. I mean, of course, there are also going to be situations where somebody just does stuff without any kind of, like, thought about it. Like, my heart is beating without any thought. I suppose if people are sleepwalking, maybe they're just, like, their body is just moving without there being any kind of cognitive element to that. But I don't know if I probably wouldn't call that, like, action. So, yeah.
So, well, just to be clear, when you say cognition, right? Like, so let's say that you're doing an activity, and there's not any kind of self-referential thought going on, right? So let's just say you're just your head's kind of just empty of thinking, and you're sort of automatically washing a dish, right? But you're not you have to think the thought, I'm washing a dish. That doesn't seem to be the case. At least in my experience, I don't think I'm washing a dish when a dish is getting washed.
Okay,
I don't just...
Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, I don't talk to myself and say, I'm washing a dish. Like, it's sort of just things happen. And I mean, I guess from the Zen perspective, they're sort of utterly mysterious if you just step back a step from them. Because when you say, like, there's these actions that make sense, like a surgeon doing some sort of sensible surgeon-like activity, right? Like, even even describing it that way and seeing the whole situation like a functional situation or a dysfunctional situation, if you pay closer attention to it, I think you would find that there's some sense in which it's utterly mysterious. In the same way that it's like, with Hume's bundle theory of identity, it seems obvious that there's a self, but if you pay a little closer attention to it, you can start seeing that there's all sorts of holes in that idea. But that's a product of paying attention to it. So we can see all sorts of things in the world, and they seem like trivially the way that they are, but upon closer inspection, it's not trivially the way that it seemed. So I'm just not sure that, like, just because something seems like a straightforward activity and that the descriptions fit it, that those things all really sort of relate to the way that reality actually is.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
Just because, yeah.
I'm very happy with the idea that, for instance, any proposition about the world is going to involve some sort of idealization. In that sense, there's going to be a kind of, to some degree, failure of correspondence or something like that. I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly the sort of thing you were getting at there, but
No.
I'm happy with that idea.
It matches. It matches really. It matches really well, actually.
But-
I wanted to talk to you about idealization, actually, like some point in the call.
Okay,
Uh,
but yeah, just to
but
just
no,
to go back.
no, but it fits. It does.
Okay. Yeah, but just to go back to, for instance, your example of washing the dishes. I mean, yeah, like, maybe this is just a failure of imagination on my part, but I mean, it really doesn't make sense to me to. I don't know how I would think about what somebody is doing, right? If we're saying that, like, they are washing dishes, but they're just suspending judgment. I mean, unless we're thinking of somebody who is, like, literally, say, sleepwalking or something like that. And I suppose maybe you can access states like that in waking life, but then I would just say you're not actually performing an action. So,
Wow. So that means that I'm not having this end of the conversation. So,
I mean, it's
but
possible that, I don't know, maybe you're a philosophical zombie or something.
well, I mean, no, I don't. I
I
think
know.
that
I mean,
you're
does
maybe
a
you.
rock perform an action when a rock rolls downhill, or like if I'm, if somebody like zaps my arm with electricity and my arm jerks? I mean, is that an action? That would seem kind of
Well,
counterintuitive.
I think that
to frame
you're
it in those terms.
you. I think that you're like. There's a subtle way in which there's a conflation here between like metacognition and just consciousness, like phenomenal consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you seem to be saying that like phenomenal consciousness is not like it requires metacognition to like occur. So I mean, to make the to make it like a simpler conversation, like we could just temporarily maybe like assume hard determinism, right? So, like when dishwashing happens, it is, just like a rock rolling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, when phenomenal consciousness is, experiencing washing a dish, right? If there's not a kind of online metacognition, I don't see how that's a problem for like a world that's just a block universe where all these events just take place, right? I mean, is there like a logical problem with that? And why does that require it be a philosophical zombie? I mean, because if there's phenomenal consciousness that's online, sort of staring at what people call a dish, right? Just the fact that it's not metacognitively, recursively reflecting on it, that doesn't seem to make it a philosophical zombie.
I don't think you need to metacognitively, recursively reflect on things. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something here.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that, like, so obviously we've heard about, in fact, actually, Bas van Frossen, he's a rock climber.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you knew that he likes rock climbing.
Yeah.
But when he cites the reason that he likes to rock climb, it's because I've heard him talk about this in interviews. It stops your thinking. You don't think, like, you sort of just do rock climbing, because if you think too much, you'll fall. And I mean, musicians report this a lot too. It's, when people talk about flow states, you stop thinking. You sort of just do the activity, and recursive thinking sort of shuts down. And I mean, if in the midline, in fact, you can see this in the midline of the brain. A sort of blood flow releases there, and there's a default mode network and a tasking network. Blood flow in the default mode network goes down when people are in flow states, and it all goes to the tasking network.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah.
I mean,
So the report is it's just that this what we call thinking, meaning like this sort of internal world, kind of shuts off temporarily to be like totally engaged with experience, right? So I'm just trying to distinguish that from like what you're calling like cognition, right?
Okay, well, no, that sounds like a case where it's like, all right, yeah, there isn't, let's say, metacognition occurring, but I mean, I just don't agree with the characterization of those states as involving not thinking.
Yeah. So yeah. So when you, that's what I'm trying to. You got to understand too. So like, just to frame this properly, like, you know, in Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy, there's going to be discrepancies between specific words, like the word thinking, right? I mean, even though like it's a common word, they have different focus. Like they're focusing on different things when it comes to the word thinking. So when you're saying thinking, it sounds like you're saying that the brain doing things is thinking. Is that generally the idea? Like when the brain does stuff, that's thinking.
No. No, I don't think so.
Okay, so what part of what the brain is doing are you calling thinking?
I don't know. It wouldn't even necessarily have to be a brain at all, right? I mean, it seems like thinking might be possible in entities that don't have brains. So I'm not sure I would.
Oh yeah, no, I don't care.
There's some
the
sort of identity
substratums
between
yeah.
brain states and.
You don't want to tie it to like some
I'm
sort
not a
of
neuroscientist,
yeah.
so I have no position on that.
Yeah, I know. I just wait, but maybe we could get clarity on it though, which is just that like, forget the substrate. It doesn't have to be a brain. Like we could say it's a computer or whatever. It doesn't matter. The substrate's irrelevant. The point I'm trying to say is like, what parts of what the brain or what the computer or whatever substrate is doing are you calling thinking versus not thinking, right? So there's certain activities that are under the header thinking, and then there's certain ones that aren't. So like, how do you discriminate?
I don't know.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean,
I'm not. I've never thought about it.
Yeah. So when you say that, like, there's a psychological impossibility to, like, sort of moving throughout the world with judgment suspended, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that's because certain thoughts will be required to do certain activities? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think you have to be representing the world as being some sort of way in order to perform actions in it. And you're also going to need some sort of goal. Like when you wash the dishes, well, the goal is going to be to get the dishes washed, you know. Presumably. Maybe, I mean, there's all sorts of goals you might have, but that's usually the goal.
Okay, so like if like let's just say for a second, like if we go with like a bundle theory of identity, right? Like to whom does that goal belong? Does the goal belong to anyone? Like where is that goal?
So if we're going with a bundle theory of identity, then the goal would not belong to any particular self. It would. I don't know. I guess it would be sort of a product of brain activity in some way, or maybe it would just be like free floating in the ether.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why
that's
would
what I'm saying is like
to belong to somebody.
Well, yeah, no, I'm just saying. So, I feel like there's, like, when the criticism is made of like the psychological aspects of skepticism, right? I feel like there's a lot of assumptions that are snuck in that maybe the skeptic wouldn't. I mean, well, obviously the skeptic wouldn't get on board with.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, like, well, they have this they have this goal. Who's they? What's a goal? I mean, do these words really actually refer accurately to things? I mean, we can be skeptical about that too, right? We can even be skeptical about if skepticism or doubt properly refers to anything, right?
I mean, like,
So I'm just saying, like,
I'm totally fine with the idea that when we talk about goals and beliefs and so on, we are idealizing what maybe and what almost certainly is a far more complex set of processes.
but I think you would grant, right, that like our idealizations can be extremely off. Like they don't, they might only, sort of capture like a scintilla of like what we're really talking about. Yep. I mean, so much so that it's just completely inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but then to go back to your sort of critique of skepticism, it seems like it I'm just trying to understand the critique now. Like if we're not sneaking identity in and saying that goals belong to people, and we're saying we actually just don't know anything about that really, then what's the critique of skepticism?
Well, wait a minute, hang on. I mean, just because, so, you can sort of point out like, well, hey, maybe these idealizations are just totally off. But, well, yeah, okay, maybe they are. But I mean, merely pointing out that that's a possibility, I don't know, I don't see how that really constitutes any kind of response. Like, I feel like I've pointed to what I see as being a problem, right? Like, I mean, so I actually just can't make sense of the idea of like a person performing actions such as washing dishes, but completely suspending judgment about the way the world is, and like not having any goals and so on. Okay, and now to say, well, maybe you're just completely mistaken in framing human activity in terms of selves and beliefs and goals and judgments and so on. Maybe all of that's wrong. Maybe you're just completely off on the wrong course. Okay, I mean, yeah, like maybe. I'm happy to.
Well, no. Okay, wait. This is good.
How does that help?
This is good. This is a good. This is a good transition to talk about Zen and mysticism. Maybe we could, because skepticism will keep arguing, but maybe this be like a fun, a weirder topic, right? Okay. But I feel like it relates to the end of this topic, which is to say, like, so, I mean, now I'm going to say something that's really trivial, right? But I feel like it's important, right? So certain, so forgive me that this is a laughably trivial statement, okay? But like, there's going to be certain philosophical propositions, right, that are going to require you to leave your house to know if they're true or not. Like, so let's say you refuse to leave your house. Like, you're a philosopher who just won't leave your house, right? Like and I say something that's going to require you to leave your house. And if you don't leave your house, you'll just never understand what I'm talking about. Like, you have to leave.
I mean, so you said that was like you said that was trivial, but I mean, I'm not sure I agree with that. So
no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, that's really it. That's really interesting. But I'm just saying, like, okay, so I think in one of the comments actually, I said something about Zen, and you said, well, maybe my empiricism is getting in the way, but I think I'd probably consider myself an empiricist. I mean, I think experience is sort of like really what we're going back to over and over again, right? So, but I mean, would you consider yourself an empiricist?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Although perhaps
like even if it's even a weird,
yeah,
a weird stripe, but still some kind of. It doesn't. I mean, this exact specificity of your empiricism, we don't need to get into it, but like some kind of empiricism, right?
Yeah,
I do like.
I want to get the
von Frassensen.
Sorry, I'm just having a look because I recall when I said that, and I just want to recall what the context was. So I'm just like,
yeah, I mean, we have a lot of threads.
I think I recall the one. I just want to make sure that like we're kind of on the same page about what. Oh crap! Where was this?
We were talking about dreams. It was you were responding to something I was saying about different sort of planes of reality going up, how do we determine we wake up from a dream kind of stuff. And then you were saying maybe your empiricism was getting in the way.
Yeah,
But to me, that's waking up from a dream strikes me as just an experience. I don't know how that's not empiricism.
I think that I can't find where I made that comment.
It does. It probably doesn't matter. We're just wasting too much time on
it. Yeah, I mean, okay. Oh, that's annoying because I thought I recalled where I said that. Oh yeah, no, I've got it. Oh yeah, no, I remember why. It's because you described it in terms of descriptive knowledge not being the right tool for accessing reality, and it was specifically the point where I was like, well, I'm not sure I care about accessing reality. I'm not sure I really know what that means, and that was when I was like, oh, maybe this is just my empiricism talking, because I think for empiricists in general, like most empiricists tend to be on the more skeptical side when it comes to like metaphysics, right? Metaphysical explanations or understanding the world beyond the phenomena. And I think empiricists in general tend to care less about that. At least that's my impression of the
well, I mean, maybe you just don't have enough background in this to know it, but mysticism is all about experience. It's not about a metaphysical claim. It's about directly experiencing something.
Cool.
So if you have a mystical branch of a religion, it's not about what the book says. It's about your direct sort of contact to things. It has nothing to do with, it might have something to do with what a book says after the fact, but during the experience is primary and it's the main thing you're pointing to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so, but wait, to go back to this thing about the house, right? So I know you were saying the trivia. So wait, let me make it more concrete, right? So, okay, you're a guy who you live in this windowless house and you just live in there, but you got a lot of philosophy books and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you're maybe skeptical that there's even the appearance of a sky and a sun because you live in this windowless house. And then I say, well, listen, all you got to do is just walk out your front door and then we can sort of have a broader conversation. And I mean, do you think that it's like sort of like important that you walk it? Like, I mean, you could just say, well, I don't have to have that broader conversation. I'm just going to stay in my windowless house. That's fine. I mean, I can't stop you. But I mean, but there's certain conversations where you got to walk outside or the conversation is just not going to make any sense. Or you're like Mary in her room, right? Like you're just in that black and white room. I can't really talk to you. Like,
I don't know. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to have a conversation with that person.
You could have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, you would never get to, it'd be like, I mean, I could have a conversation with you about like a specific like painting by Philip Guston. So I love the painter Philip Guston, right? Now, if you've never seen a Philip Guston, I could describe all sorts of things to you about it. But let's say you don't have an internet connection, you don't have a picture of it, right? Mm-hmm. There's going to be some limit in our discourse if you won't eventually just look at a Philip Guston. Like, you've got to look at it, or there's just something diminished about you don't think that there's something diminished about our conversation?
Maybe, but I'm not sure that you would, in principle, be unable to have all of the relevant descriptive knowledge. Part of why I think I have this intuition is that, we've sort of framed this in terms of somebody being stuck in a house, not going outside, but in fact, all of us, our experience is extremely limited, and the vast majority of things I think about the world are based on not experiences that I've had, but experiences that other people have reported having. If you, I don't know, just take, say, scientific knowledge. Think of all of the experiments and all of the observations that have, built up even what might seem like very, very basic experiments, most people will never perform them themselves. And so I like it seems like we're all in this position all the
I
time.
follow what you're I follow what you're saying there, but okay, here we can make the point even more basic, right? So if you're Mary in her black and white room, right, and I talk to you about what red's like,
Yeah.
and then you as Mary experience red, do you not think that you gained an additional thing? What do you think that you have another knowledge, or you have nothing new that you've gained?
My intuition, and I mean this can only be an intuition because this is obviously a thought experiment that is like, I can't see things from Mary's perspective, and this has never happened, and so on. But my intuition is that Mary doesn't gain any new knowledge on seeing red. That's just my intuition. Like I could be, that could be completely wrong, but
yeah, but not even tacitly. Are you talking about descriptively, or there's just in no
I don't think
sense
she gains anything.
does she gain?
I think she would know exactly what to expect. Again, I have to sort of play along with the assumptions of the thought experiment here, which I don't necessarily agree with. So, when the the usual way of presenting this thought experiment is that Mary knows all of the physical properties of color, like she knows all of the physical information. I'm not sure that like I know what physical properties or physical information actually is, but I can kind of play along with the thought experiment. Yeah, I mean, so I guess let me put it this way: Mary's room was originally a challenge to physicalism. If I kind of put on the physicalist cap and try to look at it from a physicalist point of view, I just have the intuition that Mary would in fact know everything there is to know about color, and that she would gain nothing on leaving the room. That's my
so like, yeah, all right, okay. So I mean, this might be like a sappy example. So forgive me for getting sappy, right?
Right.
Okay, so we have thousands of videos now, right, of people who are colorblind. They basically see varying gradations of sort of like a gray brown, right?
Yeah.
And now we have special glasses where they can put these glasses on and they can actually see colors sort of, exactly how we see them, right? Now, if we look at what happens when these people do this, even like, they have like, hardened old men. I mean, like people who are like, it's just some old dude who's like, fuck, what? Like, he's just some old guy who he's not an emotional guy. Puts these glasses on and he instantaneously breaks into tears, like he's seen the greatest work of art he's ever seen in his whole life, right? And he says that there's no way he can put into words like what's just happened, right? Mm-hmm. So so if we're not eliminative materialists, if we're not like the that couple, I forget their name again. What's that couple?
The Churchlands.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're not the Churchlands, if we're not the Churchlands, so the Churchlands might look at that and go, I don't know, I don't care about that. But if we're not the Churchlands, I don't know, what is your sense when that happens thousands and thousands of times over and over again, that people are just instantly brought to tears by seeing red? Like, why is that happening?
I mean, so maybe those people do gain some new knowledge. Obviously, they're not in the position that Mary is, of being like brilliant neuroscientists who know everything there is to know about how the brain works and everything. So yeah, I'm happy to grant that they gain something new. But I would also add, though, that I don't really put much weight on the emotional reactions that they have, because I think that can happen with things that we already know about. So if you imagine somebody who maybe is sent off to a war and is held in a prisoner of war camp for like 10 years, then they come back and they eat some chocolate cake for like the first time in 10 years, they might just break down. They're like, oh my god, wow, now they know what chocolate cake tastes like, they've had it before, maybe it's like their favorite food when they were a kid. So they come back home, they have their favorite food, they know exactly what to expect. They know exactly what it's like. They don't learn anything new on eating it, but they have this incredible emotional reaction, because you don't have to learn something new in order for an experience to be special to you. But I would agree that in the case of people, wearing colour glasses, I don't know. I've never really read so much about that example. I'm assuming that they do, in fact, see new colours. I'm happy to say that they learn something.
Well, yeah. But to be clear too, that like actually before they put these glasses on, because of the shades of gray and brown that are available to them, they know that this particular shade of gray brown is what people call red.
Yeah.
So they already have that. Their labels are the same as our labels. So they still have that label. It's still, it's still red. They still know what purple is. They just don't. There's some additional factor that they're not accessing, right? So I would just say that so that the labels don't change when they put those glasses on. Something else changes. Now you're sort of saying that if they had more sophisticated labels, if somehow like they were studying like light spectrums and sort of knew everything about like this, if they just had more meticulous labels, somehow they wouldn't be gaining anything. So like is that what you're saying?
I don't.
Or is that what
it seems to be like the labels do change. I mean, so when somebody is, say, red-green colorblind, they can't distinguish between certain reds and certain greens. And then my understanding is that when you give them these glasses, they then are able to make those distinctions. So like I could, it's like you hold up those cards that have like numbers on them and splotches of color. I don't know if you've seen them. They're used to like test color blindness.
Yes, yeah.
So if you show me one of those cards, I'd be able to see a 12 in it, and I'd be able to be like, okay, the 12 is red and the background is green. But if you show that to somebody who's red-green colorblind, it would just be a grey circle. So it seems like they have, like, their descriptive knowledge has changed, or the way that they label things has changed.
Yeah, okay. So, so if we, do you think that, like, do you see no distinction between reading everything that you could possibly read about Japan and living there for 10 years? Did you see those as not distinct sort of things?
Are we imagining, is this a thought experiment where there's, I don't know, a library that like contains all of the information about Japan?
Well, yeah, wait. So this is my point. This is my point about the color, right? Is that, so remember earlier when we were talking about idealizations, so like about idealizing things. So I don't see how, no matter how meticulous we get about the color red, that our descriptive statements about red aren't still just sort of weak, idealized descriptions of the actual event. So meaning like, I don't understand how when you say you don't gain any knowledge, if we're admitting that idealization is kind of what's happening when we talk about stuff, and that the actual world is, maybe infinitely more complex than we're noticing, then to actually walk out of that windowless house is going to fill your head with, information that is just not, there's not enough descriptions to capture what's outside that house.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I just don't.
Obviously with something like Mary's Room, I'm going along with the thought experiment where there isn't idealization occurring, right? So
yeah,
I mean,
but your personal hunch though, like,
yeah, I think that, so I can't there are certain things about my experience of red that I can't express using descriptive propositions. Like I don't know how I would go about describing red to somebody who's blind. So it seems like there are limits to what I can do with propositions.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, another thing. Here's another just point. Maybe this makes it more clear than. As I want to get out of this example about the room because I want to talk to you about mysticism, but I have to lay a little bit of groundwork, or otherwise I'm just going to be talking in a lingo that makes no sense to you. Like, and I really want to make sense to you, you know, because I feel like it actually supports certain things about skepticism in a way, but we're gonna have to wrap back around to it.
Okay.
Like we're gonna have to go through mysticism and Zen, and then when we go back to skepticism, we go, okay, well, if we have all that framework in place, maybe it's different than what you assume, right? But so, would you agree that there's just clearly tacit counterparts to certain things that matter, like in the surgeon case, or so maybe like a sex therapist, right? We want a sex therapist who's had sex. Like, I feel like if I have to pick between a sex therapist who's had sex and a virgin sex therapist, I'm not going to have a virgin sex therapist because we just know that their encounters are just, they might actually have perfectly sound psychological things to say. I mean, maybe you wouldn't have a preference. Would you have a preference?
I don't have a preference on that point. But I agree with your general point.
Yeah.
Like the general point that, like tacit knowledge, know-how matters to us. If it's a surgeon, then
but I don't think
that matters. I don't have the same intuition about a sex therapist.
Yeah, okay. But I'm just saying because like anytime, you know, like there's a lot of weird things that can happen during sex, right? so you know, and maybe we haven't wrote all those things down. Maybe that no one's thought to describe all the weirdness about it. It's just not all been captured. So if we talk to someone, you know, their experience might just fall outside the domain of what we've currently captured. So I just think to say, I mean, yeah.
But wait a minute. I mean, so maybe to go back to like the example of red, because this is just very, very straightforward. Like that's just, I can see like a red square. Now there are things about that I can't express, and you know, so maybe there are aspects of my experience that I can't put in descriptive terms, but then I would say I feel like I can't really communicate that to anybody, including other people who can see red. I mean, it just, because you've also seen red, then I guess in some sense you like are going to have the same, I don't know if I would even be inclined to call it knowledge, but maybe understanding or something that I have. But insofar as there are certain aspects of that experience that I can't put in descriptive terms, I don't know how else to communicate them. And so, I feel like with the case of like the sex therapist, for instance, it's like, so during sex, maybe there are some things that we can't put in descriptive terms, but then I don't see how that's going to be helpful, regardless of whether or not the therapist has had sex. And unless there's like ways of, because maybe there are ways that that you can communicate to people by you know, in like a non-propositional way, maybe via body language or something, you can kind of, I don't know, resonate with them somehow and like compel their brain to change in such a way that they have understanding. I guess that might be possible.
Well, I mean, another thing is that they might describe certain things, or they might have a take on something that is just not part of our documentation yet, right? I'm not saying that they can't describe something, that maybe they're describing something that we just haven't documented yet. I'm not talking about ineffability per se.
Okay.
I'm just saying that, you know, the fact that they have, you know, a person might have personal experiences that just fall outside our current documentation about a thing.
Okay, yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they're restricted from descriptively describe. Doesn't mean they can't describe it. It just means that, you know, the person who's never had sex won't even have an example. I mean, they might have an example, but the example is it's not going to have to do with sex. It's going to have to do with not having had it, right?
Right. Okay.
So, So, oh, and the thing you were saying about red, I don't know if this analogy would follow, but it's like, would you say there's a sense in which, I mean, maybe you want to limit it to like the human version of it, but like, so even if we can't describe these things about red to each other that we've seen, you might say that we've both sort of tacitly accessed sort of the uncompressed version of red, and that our language version of red maybe is, it's like sort of like software compression. We're sort of compressing it into something that's easier to transmit, right? You know, we're transmitting it to each other in this word called red. It doesn't capture all of it. The uncompressed thing is something maybe we only see with vision, and then maybe there's something even beyond a more uncompressed version that human eyes can't access or whatever. But would you say to some extent that the inexplicableness of red, that we both have access to some sort of equivalent inexplicable thing? Or would you say no, like you don't take that to be the case?
I don't know whether we have access to an equivalent inexplicable thing, because I can't see things from your point of view. I can't see out of your eyes. I don't think that I would see perception as delivering a kind of uncompressed version of what we can express linguistically, because I think perception also, you know, it also kind of idealizes, and once you have language,
that's why I said the human.
Yeah, but I mean, also once you have language, you can actually use that to express like a lot more. It's a different, you know, like I guess different means of access, perhaps, but
yeah. So the surgeon. So it seems like in the surgeon case, their tacit knowledge really matters to you because you could die on the basis of it. But the sex therapist, you're seeing it as kind of like their tacit knowledge is sort of trivial, maybe because sex therapy is trivial. I'm just trying to see what you're distinguishing between the case of the surgeon.
It's just that. So the reason why I wouldn't want somebody who's only read books when doing surgery is because you have to like train your muscles and stuff. So there are going to be particular movements you make with the knife that I'm going to want somebody who's got that kind of muscle memory. That would seem safer. So that's the difference. Whereas with a therapist, like the relevant tacit knowledge there is there. I would see that as involving their ability to interact with people, to communicate things with people, and somebody who's a virgin sex therapist could have all of that relevant tacit knowledge. They wouldn't have maybe the same experience of sex.
Yeah, the tacit knowledge of. The tacit knowledge of communicating, but they would be. But we sort of agree that they would have limited sort of novel examples to draw from. So they could only draw from what they have available in the literature, but they have no novel examples to draw from. And let's say, I mean, if we desired someone with novel examples to draw from, I imagine then it would be relevant.
Maybe, although, I think I agree with that. It seems like you are going to struggle to find somebody who would be particularly satisfying in that case, but I guess, yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, there's a lot that's been written about sex, right? There's a lot of people who spend a lot of time describing various experiences. It's going to take a lot for somebody to have a genuinely novel example that wouldn't be accessible to a very, very well-read version.
Yeah, so we might we might. That's really funny. A really well-read version. Okay. All right. So we might have different sort of fields where there's it's easier to get novelty, or it might be more difficult, and it's field dependent, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think I disagree with that sentiment really. But I'm just sort of stuck on this point of, so like, all right, I guess, so in your, you did a video about, bundle theory of identity. And, you obviously you mentioned Buddhism and Eastern philosophy has been talking about it for a long time. It's not just Hume. They've been talking about it forever, really. The point, the point is that there's a difference, sort of in emphasis, and I think this is a big sort of distinction between just Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy in general. Is just that I feel like Eastern philosophy sort of more takes it as like just obviously the case that our language is an idealizing thing, and that actual things are not idealized, and we encounter things all the time that are sort of non-ideal. I mean, once again, you could say like, well, the human sort of machinery kind of idealizes things in its own way, but still, I mean, the descriptions are kind of, they don't only have the character that they're idealized, they also can sort of be arbitrary and kind of created by fiat based on our specific contextual interests. So they're not really broad. They're very, we're kind of like put a flashlight on this and create the parameters. And that's how we get sort of this ideal, it's context dependent too. Mm-hmm. It's not just that it's idealized. It's also the context kind of frames it as another part of it. So, Eastern philosophy sort of just takes for granted that that's obvious that we're doing that, and that there's a world, there's the way the world is when we're not doing that. So there's when we're running that machinery and software, there's a way we talk about the world, and then there's a way that the world presents itself when we're not running that machinery. So when Hume describes his bundle theory of identity, it's I feel like it's very descriptively adequate, but there's a tacit counterpart to the bundle theory of identity, which is what the Buddhists talk about. Because the Buddhists aren't talking about how do we get the best possible description of why identity isn't there. They're talking about, well, I can show you that identity is not there. Just like I can show you red if you put these glasses on. If you put these glasses on, red is you instantly access red. I don't have to give you a speech about it. The glasses do the work for you. There doesn't need to be a philosophical conversation. So I think in Eastern philosophy, they're more sort of asking you to put certain glasses on. They're saying if you put these glasses on, you'll have access to this, to where you didn't have access to it before, and that access changes our conversation. So I think this is probably a perfect example. If we couldn't make the analogy to dreams and to DMT trips, would we agree that the skeptical case is in some way weaker because we don't have those sort of empirical kind of examples of the fact that we can have a totally convincing self-contained reality that is all-encompassing? And we have these real empirical examples. We can give you DMT. You can have a dream.
Yeah.
And if we didn't, let's say if they didn't exist, there were no dreams, there were no drugs that could do that, it seems like the skeptical argument would be diminished in some sense. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the fact that the reason why I think it would be diminished is that I think that the case of dreams and DMT trips are a pretty powerful response to those people who are inclined to respond to skepticism by pointing to like certain features of everyday waking experience. Like if you say that it's the stability and coherence of everyday waking experience that requires there to be an external world, or that's best explained by an external world, or something like that, I think that dreams and DMT trips are a pretty convincing refutation of that position.
Okay, you know what? I could have saved us a half hour by just starting here. Sorry, I'm trying to like work my way in because I'm of both worlds. I love Western philosophy, and like I said, in fact, we share like two heroes. Like, Fire Against Meth is one of my favorite books ever. Like, so, I feel like, when I watched your channel, I instantly knew like we're in the two people demographic. So I don't know why I feel compelled to try to kind of get through to you with a certain point about mysticism, but. It's just like, so, okay, let's say we didn't have the dream example, but let's say DMT existed, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're an anti-skeptic and I'm a skeptic, right? And I say, well, there's this thing, DMT, it's just like reality. In fact, the thing, I watched your video about it. Your video kind of left out that almost 100% of people who take DMT describe it as more real than reality. Not one of the main descriptive characteristics of a DMT trip is that this place seems fake by comparison. Yeah. This seems like a crappy knockoff of the DMT realm. So this is a knockoff reality in comparison is the description. So it's not just that it's equivalent. It's that we can show you something that makes this seem like a knockoff by comparison. So the point is, if you're an anti-skeptic and I'm the skeptic, and I say there's this thing DMT that does the same thing, and then your reply is, well, I don't think DMT does that, and then I say, well, what? Like, here, just take DMT, and then you'll have no doubt at all. Like, it'd just be clear to you, and then you refuse to take it. Then I feel like the impasse that we're meeting is not a problem with sort of just. It's not a problem with descriptions. It's sort of a problem with, like, now I'm going back to the guy not leaving his house example. Like, you have to see if you don't see the DMT trip and you just refuse to believe that it accurately recreates something better than reality, then we can't go forward. Like, I don't know how to convince you from that point. I mean, you could be an open-minded person and just say that you accept it without seeing it. So I don't think that there's anything preventing you, but I think that a lot of anti-skeptics. I'm going to pick on Dan Dennett for a second. Like Daniel Dennett, he makes specific arguments to where that if he went on a DMT trip, I know for a fact that his confidence about certain arguments that he makes would fall apart. Like, they would just be crushed because his encounter would make his descriptive knowledge would no longer make sense. It's not just that he would have a tacit thing that he couldn't describe. It's that upon returning to look at his descriptive work, the descriptive work would just be gobbledygook. Like, it wouldn't make any sense given this other encounter. Okay. So I'm just saying, like, there are certain things where we both said that we at least are some kind of empiricists, right? So it seems that our ideas are coming from some sort of visceral interaction with things. It's like a lot of our ideas seem to be dependent on some visceral stuff, right? I mean, I'm just trying to get like common ground on this point, unless there is no common ground on it.
Okay, so yes, I'm happy with that general claim. I'm a bit curious about, so when you say that if Dan Dennett were to take DMT, his confidence in certain descriptive knowledge would fall apart. Do you think that it's necessary for him to take the DMT in order for that confidence to fall apart, or is it only necessary for him to believe what other people report about their experiences when they have DMT?
I really think it's necessary because when you read, okay, so like if you read a report about a hallucination, right, and you read a report about a DMT trip, descriptively they could both contain like identical qualities, right? So you might have some sort of schizophrenic episode that produces a scenario that seems identical to maybe something that a DMT trip contains in terms of content.
Yeah.
But there's an additional factor, there's an additional missing factor that is this kind of thing that if we talk to people who have when we talk to people who have mental health issues, you can ask them and survey them sort of about whether or not their visions equal something that we consider to be an object. So like if I hold this keyboard and then they have like an imaginary mouse they see, we can actually sort of ask, does this have more solidity or the imaginary mouse, like which they're seeing all the time? And in the case of the schizophrenic, they're seeing something that has an equivalent reality to the keyboard. It feels equivalently real. There's not an ability to discern this keyboard from some, fictional episode. The thing that's very hard to sort of capture descriptively that I would want Dan Dennett to see is what makes this reality seem like a knockoff by comparison. If you kind of need... So for here, this is might be a perfect example. I'm sorry this is taking me so long to like run through these examples because I really want to get somewhere with this. It's like if you have like a tiny stamp-sized picture of a let's say a Jackson Pollock painting, because his paintings are enormous, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got the stamp. Let's say it's the right aspect ratio and the lines are it captures it, but you've got this stamp, and then you go and you see the Jackson Pollock thing, and then you realize that there's a third dimension to paintings. And because all your paintings are these little stamps, you've sort of never really understood that there's this third dimension to paintings that you sort of now acquire when you walk into the museum and you see this large scale Pollock. You actually see how much the paint actually moves off the surface of the canvas, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if all of your sort of impressions of artwork up until that point were two-dimensional, even if you have the reference that, well, there's art that's sort of more like your hand, that sort of, is, I don't know, three-dimensional, it's very hard to describe because I can show you a tesseract, but the kind of things that you would experience in a DMT trip, it's borderline. If you moved into like a higher, like when I say dimension, I don't mean what I mean by dimension, I mean like a geometry dimension. Yeah. Meaning like if you moved into like a 6-dimensional space and then you came back to 3 dimensions, and then you show Dan Dennett a tesseract or whatever. I mean, that's 4, but you show him something like that. It doesn't do it. That's not going to flat. If you're in Flatland, our descriptions of 3D, there's nothing available here that's anything like it. There's nothing like it available here. Not one thing. There's nothing available in your normal experience or anywhere you could go on the planet that's equivalent. So when I say Dan Dennett would have to take the substance, he would have to take it because I can't find him a reference on Earth where the descriptions aren't just going to lead him back to a memory of something about this plane of reality. Meaning that any description he reads of a DMT trip will lead him to imagine things in terms of his background 3-dimensional experience. Mm-hmm. But if we're talking about a 6-dimensional experience, he's going to be using 3-dimensional analogies from his memory, when if he just went and had the actual 6-dimensional experience and came back, he would go, oh yeah, I had no fucking clue what I was talking about. Like there's just no way that there was no way that my memory of perception could have ever provided me with it. If I read someone else's account, I can only conjure up in my mind using what I already have. It's like when you read a novel, like you're sort of creating the novel also sort of partially based on your history. Yeah. I can read Moby Dick, but I'm kind of creating Moby Dick when I'm reading it based on my prior prejudices, right? Okay. So, and if you read it, you'll have a different, your mental Moby Dick is going to be different than mine. Yeah. It's just, but we both go on a whaling ship together. At least we have the same whaling ship. Okay. We can.
So how does any of this, like, experience of a completely different plane, experience of the six-dimensional reality, whatever, how would that undermine descriptive knowledge that we have of this world, of the normal, let's say, the normal world?
I mean, it would highlight its inadequacy in the extreme. Its inadequacy would be highlighted. So I'm not saying that like any propositional state. I'm not saying if you lined up propositional statements, they'll somehow fail if you had this experience, but their inadequacy will be made obvious to you. There's a different. It's kind of a different thing. I think you're thinking like, will it computationally not work? Well, that's the way the game's set up. It's like it's the game of.
Okay, so let's say
it's computationally set up to work.
Let's say I make a claim.
For being annoying.
I could make a claim like the temperature of this glass of water is 20 degrees, right? Say, and it seems like I can. I mean, and in fact, this isn't just a hypothetical, right? I do think that this is highly idealized, because I think that when we try to attach a referent to the glass of water, there are many possible referents. There are many ways of like drawing the boundaries, drawing the lines around the glass of water. When we assume that the water has a specific value for its temperature, like again, that is an idealization. It's not like there's going to be a perfectly uniform temperature throughout the whole water, throughout like the whole glass of water, etc. Right? So there's all sorts of ways in which I'm idealizing, and I can hold that view now. It doesn't seem like I have to engage in a DMT trip to recognize that there are inadequacies in that respect, in the things that I take myself to know, or in the propositions that I take to be true.
Yeah, I agree with that general sentiment. I think that what's missing, though, is to the extent in which it's inadequate. So meaning the extent in which it's inadequate is you're only going to be able to refer back to your sort of, the rational ways that you kind of deduced it, or maybe your memories of the provisional world will, lend support to it. Things that we've empirically observed that show that things are idealized, right? But it's only going to seem sort of plausible to see them as idealized to the extent that what we're empirically using to show that it's idealized, there's an extent to which what we take the real, how far we take the ideal, man, I can't talk, how ideal we take it to be, and how approximate, it's going to have to do with what we've empirically observed that sort of contradicts it, right? So if we give you something like a mystical experience, the extent in which it's contradicted is dramatically different than the examples that you would cite based on provisional reality. So it's just, and I think that getting acquainted with that extent can be relevant, just like going outside your house. I mean, I still think that it'd be valuable for any philosopher to leave their house. I know it might not be trivial, or it's a controversial statement, but I think leaving the house is important to philosophy. I just want to get that on the record. But I was just saying that, perfect example. So, in one of your videos, you use this example of people not seeing an anomalous card. There's like a black queen or like a black four of hearts, and they don't see the anomalous card, right?
Yeah.
But you point out that the criticism of this is that they did it too quick. They didn't pay enough attention. If they paid enough attention, they would have seen the anomalous card.
Yeah.
So it's kind of dependent on the fact that they didn't really, that they were sort of, their attention was careless. It sort of depends on that. Like if you ask them to pay really, really close attention, it changes everything, and they spot the anomaly, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe to segue into Zen, right? The point, what Zen and mysticism is trying to point to is that all of our observations of the world, all of our experience of the world, obviously mediated through consciousness. So anything we say, there's a sort of base layer. So if we're looking through a telescope, our experience of looking through the telescope still mediated by a prior experience of just being awake.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, do we disagree on that?
No.
But we could go down a lot. I know we can disagree about it if we want. But I'm just saying, it seems to be that there's a seeming. Maybe we don't have to call it consciousness. We could just say seeming. There's a seeming that sort of preempts looking through a telescope, and the act of looking through a telescope includes that seeming, and that seeming is not going away during each instance of us making our scientific or philosophical observations about the world.
Okay.
The seeming sort of it's kind of like a base layer. It's a base layer that's sort of prior to looking through a telescope. It's not even prior to it. Takes place during it. It continues after we look through the telescope and just goes. Mm-hmm. Now, if let's say we have like extreme focus and extreme care with the way that we calibrate our telescope, we have extreme care in the way that we pick the lensing, and the way that everything is put together. Like, we've really thought this through, but it's still being mediated through this thing where we put very little care and attention on what it's like to actually just be aware is something that, at least when I talk to scientists and philosophers, they sort of like have just completely overlooked this sort of more foundational thing. And it's kind of like the thought experiment with the cards, where everything's following from the fact that you haven't seen this anomalous card because you haven't paid enough attention. And now you're organizing the cards in such a way that's following from your lack of attention. Like, meaning the way that you're organizing is actually predicated on the fact that you've paid no attention to the seeming part that underlies all that other stuff.
Okay.
And since you've given it inadequate attention, you're coming to conclusions that are contaminated by the inadequacy on awareness itself. And if you paid ultra close attention to awareness itself, everything changes dramatically. I mean, so dramatically, I don't want to understate this, but it's more dramatic than the transition from dream to what you'd call provisional waking state. It's a larger jump. It's even larger than the jump from here to the DMT trip. So, right. And it doesn't, and we're saying propositionally, they don't follow. If we start with the ingredient of paying very close attention to awareness, we get an entirely different result than we get if we don't pay attention to awareness at all and just carry on with all the complex stuff that follows from that. You just wind up in two different places. And I feel like that's a problem.
So, I guess just to relate this to the example I gave earlier of, I have a glass of water. Let's say I measure the temperature. I say, okay, temperature's 20 degrees of the water. Now, so what I'm going to be getting from this, mystical experience is not like new information in the sense of, I put another thermometer in and it turns out it's actually 50 degrees or something like that. I'm obviously not, because like earlier you described there being a kind of contradiction between the knowledge that we have of provisional reality and what we then understand when we have these experiences. But it's not contradictory in the sense of like, the glass of water is 20 degrees and the glass of water is 50 degrees might be thought to be contradictory. And it also seems like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if the idea is that, well, you can have experiences or you can engage with the world just in a completely different way, where we're not framing things or conceptualizing things in terms of glasses and water and temperature and so on. I mean, okay, maybe we can have those experiences, but it seems like at some point you're going to have to start having something that approaches normal experience again. Like, you know, the so when I did read a bit about the, you know, mystical experiences on Stanford, so I did have a quick look at that, and like nobody's arguing that those experiences just extend forever, like they continue forever. You know, you have the experience and then sooner or later you start experiencing things in a more like normal kind of way. And as soon as that happens, it seems like you have to start making judgments about the temperature of the glass of water. You know, if I was to put two glasses of water
all right,
in front
let me
of
just
you
wait. Sorry. Obviously, as with anything on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, it's a very limited taste of the thing. It's not like it's not really comprehensive. I mean, it's an encyclopedia article, so it's not comprehensive. So when you say that mystical experiences don't extend, that's just not true. My own everyday experience is not at all what it was like 6 years ago.
Okay, so do you not make judgments about the temperature of glasses of water? Like, if I was to, I don't know, let's say you're thirsty, I put two glasses of water in front of you, I say, you know, one of these is sort of hot enough that it will burn your mouth, and the other is a comfortable temperature. What, are you like not going to have any preference about which one you drink, or like what's going on?
No.
How are you framing it?
See, that's already assumed too much, because it's assumed I'm located here. I experience things from behind, you know, supposedly in a head, and I'm looking at two objects, and that this is not sort of just all an automatic sort of totality.
Okay, I'm not.
That doesn't.
No, I'm not trying to like. I'm trying to describe things from, you know, my point of view here, and so maybe just to be clear,
I don't think
I'm trying to.
I don't think third person anything would change for you.
Yeah, I know. But
for you third person, you would for you third person, you would see all the conventional activities that you would expect.
Yeah.
But we know that there's a huge discrepancy between third person.
But then
and
I'm asking you, you know, what it's like from your point of view. I'm trying to elicit that information. So I'm describing
it doesn't
how things
feel
seem
it doesn't
from my
feel
point
like
of view.
yeah.
And now I'm asking, you know, okay, so I've done this thing, and like, what's going on in your head? Because you say this is completely different, right? Like, you're not seeing things in anything like the way I am. So
I mean, all the things that happen, they don't seem discrete from, you know, like if there's a body that's moving and selecting a glass on a table, that's not felt as somehow any different than like weather or like, you know, the way, you know, trees move in the breeze. I don't have like I don't have a distinct feeling that there's some sort of location that's like a central vantage point. That's just not. It's just that whole paradigm is just overturned.
right.
And it's gonna. Oh, of course, it's gonna look. It's gonna look the same from your point of view. I mean, it can't change that. But it doesn't. There's no way in which it feels similar to, I would say, a reference point of just what I know that provisional reality feels like when other people describe it, and when before I went through. So just to give you a little background, you know, I've done like
before we do this, I have to go for a piss. I'm really desperate.
Oh, that's fine.
That. Unfortunately, okay. I still live in provisional reality where, in order to like I have goals and I have to act on the way I'm representing the world.
I'm not trying to make you upset, dude. I love you, man. Like I watch every video. Yeah,
that was my attempt at banter, which apparently didn't come across very well. So apologies.
Oh well, no, it's just because you said you hate skeptics. I felt like, oh, maybe he's irritated. I don't. It's not my goal ever to make you upset.
No, I'm not. I'm not irritated. So my state, I would describe it as I just find what you said incomprehensible. I mean, there's nothing. Nothing to be irritated about.
Think about what a Zen koan is. The whole point. What is the point of a Zen koan? You think the Zen koan, the point of it is to be comprehended? Like even in your video about John Cage.
Oh, I find
you realize that the point of a Zen
in a way. Yeah, I mean maybe I can't go for a piss.
Yeah, but
we can come back to this.
Yeah,
I really have to go. Sorry.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
See, but this is why I was trying to emphasize tacit experience, by the way, because so for example, there's ways I could instantly get you to understand everything I'm saying. So I could give you 5 dried grams of mushrooms, not DMT, 5 dried grams of mushrooms, or there's a specific variant of DMT, not the one that's publicized. But I could give it to you, and you would instantly understand what I'm talking about, and you would have there would not be any way that it would be it would be incomprehensible, but you would at least know that it exists, and you would also see that there's no logical reason why it shouldn't why because the durations can vary. That you can have this happen for 5 minutes, you can have it happen for days, you could have it happen for weeks, or you can have parts of the mystical experience sort of indefinitely sort of lodge themselves into the way that reality is experienced. Now, if you say it's incomprehensible, this points to exactly why it's important that you leave that house. Because I'm really talking about something where there's no frame of reference you could have in normal reality. It's just not. And what makes it unique, in my opinion, is that unlike a hallucination, it's not additive. It's not additive. There's not and then a gargoyle appeared, and then this thing happened, and then there's this narrative or God or whatever. None of that is part of it. It's just a complete dismantling of the everyday framework by which the world is perceived. And that dismantling, after that dismantling takes place, you're shown something that makes this, what you would call your life now, seem like sort of a cardboard cutout, like a kind of shoddy reproduction of the mystical state.
Mm-hmm.
The mystical state would be like, oh, I went to the museum, I saw the real thing, and now I'm back with my stamp version of the painting. You're going to have the memory if you leave the museum. You'll know I was at the museum, I saw the real Jackson Pollock, but now all you have is this stamp. And the difference between the stamp and the museum painting is more clear now. Because you actually, like, it's just, unlike other examples, there's nothing here I can't say, well, if I described it by virtue of some perceptual thing. The mystical experience it's not really perceptual. It has to do more with that fundamental seeming or awakeness or awareness quality. It's sort of more like, what's that? Not about sensory qualities. It has nothing to do with anything I can sort of reference. But you would know, just like you would know the real Pollock painting versus the stamp, you would know the difference. And it is a problem in mysticism, by the way, that people engage with it probably more prevalently in popular culture through drugs, which are more temporary, because meditation is sober and it's more applicable to normal life. You can meditate while you do the dishes. There's nothing that stops you from meditating when dishes are being done. So the fact that meditation is something that's kind of an ongoing process distinguishes it from psychedelics. The advantage psychedelics have is that they're guaranteed. I can give you 5 dried grams of mushrooms, and then there will be no disagreement. You just come back, and then you go, yeah, this really is a shoddy version. This is a replica version. It's a piece of crap compared to this. And what's funny, though, is you would have the feeling that your whole life you've been seeing a reproduction. It was just obvious that you never saw the real thing.
Okay.
And then you can become more in touch with it over time. It doesn't have to go away. That's just sort of, people who do drugs or have spontaneous experiences. It's like seeing a rare animal. You see it for a second and it goes behind a tree. That's different than spending time with that animal and making it your pet. So, I mean, the Stanford website, they kind of made it sound like it's all about rare sightings, but that's just not, they just didn't go in enough detail about it, really.
All right, fair enough.
Sorry.
So I feel like this is kind of like a really shitty question, but I mean, so you said, for instance, that you said, I can give you 5 grams of psychedelic mushrooms, right? So it seems like, you're framing things in terms of, I think, what you've described as provisional reality or provisional knowledge. You're framing things in terms of there being different selves and there being, objects in the world that have effects on things and so on. So what was the problem? Like, you can say, I can give you 5 grams of psychedelic mushrooms. But then when I asked you about the glasses of water, you weren't able to communicate how you would, like, interact with them or think about them. I mean, I don't see why there would be a problem in the glasses of water case.
No, I didn't. That's not true. I think you're mischaracterizing what I said. So I said that the instance of the glass of water would carry out from the third person exactly how you would expect it to. Mm-hmm. And so will this conversation, and so will anything that I seemingly say. It will carry out exactly as expected, just the same way the ocean carries out like expected. I mean, but we don't attribute all these additional things to it. But the temptation to attribute all these additional things to this conversation and human beings and make believe like there's things like agents and stuff has to do with not seeing the alternative to that. So like all there is just the experience of what culture and intellectual cultures handed you or some other person, and that's just not, I don't think it's going to do the trick to sort of like, it's not going to perform an exorcism on seeing why that that's so far removed from, I guess, what I would say the way things actually are. You'd have to actually see it.
I don't know, but then why would you why are you endorsing a claim such as I could give you 5 grams of psychedelic mushrooms? I mean, that seems exactly the same as a claim like I would put a thermometer in both of the glasses to see which was hotter and which was colder.
And let me try to frame it a little bit differently. So, because maybe this is an alternate way of actually answering your question. So Moore talks about the hand being like his refutation of skepticism is the obviousness of the hand.
Yeah.
Right. So just I'm not trying to pick on your video on Zen, but there was it's a common popular misconception that it's what's the sound of one hand clapping. Mm-hmm. That's not the koan's never. That's not the koan. It has never been the koan. Yeah. That's just popular culture's just made it that. The clear, actual koan is.
I do just want to clarify because you said your video on Zen. I would characterize it as a video on John Cage, which is expressing a perhaps confused interpretation of what John Cage thought Zen was. So we're several steps removed from a video on Zen.
Yeah, that's fine. I grant that totally. That's fine. But there's a subset of that video. The end of the video is about Zen, but it just says what is the sound of one hand clapping, which is just a popular mistranslation of what the actual koan is. So the actual koan is what is the sound of one hand. So it's not what is the sound of one hand clapping. It's what is the sound of one hand. Mm. So it's more mysterious than what is the sound of one hand clapping.
Is it? I think the popular version is more poetic, but I don't know. Does it make a difference? Is it like
whatever?
Is the difference important?
It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference, but the point, I find this kind of poetic actually. So Moore, he points to the hand as being, I mean, like, what proposition's more obvious than a hand? I am going to get to your glass of water thing. I'm doing it via these means. So, let the hand stand in for the glass of water or whatever conventional activity you're going to say I'm partaking in. Hands. They're so obvious. A hand. What could be more obvious than a hand? Any philosophical proposition is going to be more convoluted than just the fact that I have a hand, right? What I find poetic about this is that Zen uses the hand too. Like that's one of what they call like the sort of preliminary koans. So one of the first things you're given is what is the sound of one hand. But you're given that actually to come to the exact opposite conclusion of Moore. So he uses the hand to say, like, look, hands, it just proves it. It's obvious, because what could be more simple than a hand propositionally? Like anything else, we're going to be expounding upon a bunch of weird stuff that just gets outside of how basic this is. You're given the hand in Zen for the exact opposite purpose. You're given the hand to realize that this is utterly mysterious. You don't have any clue what this is if you really pay attention. If you slightly pay attention, it just seems so obvious. A hand, what could be more obvious? But just like the playing cards, you're missing the anomaly because you're looking too quickly. You're looking and going, hand, I've always taken it for granted before. Why not take it for granted now? And then you put it away and then you're satisfied and you refuted skepticism. The Zen point is really pay attention to this. Actually look through the playing cards and you find the anomaly. Just glance at it and you just take the 4 of hearts to be red, even though it's black. But the point Zen is trying to make is if we really, really pay attention to this incredibly ordinary thing that we're calling a hand, you realize that you don't know anything about it. You're just deluding yourself. You don't know anything about it. Not one thing. at all. You just know nothing about it. It's just not what you thought it was, and you're shown directly that you knew nothing about it, I guess, through something like a mystical experience, or in Zen they'd call it kensho. But there's nothing, you don't have to believe anything. In fact, the koan is operating to disabuse you of your beliefs. It's sort of like what von Frassen says about science, or empiricism in science is the way that we get rid of beliefs. It's the empirical stance helps us shed beliefs, right? So Zen, sort of through a tacit methodology, is trying to say, if you really pay attention to being aware, you realize, or being aware of something as simple and basic as a hand, the more you pay attention to it, the more clear it is you have no clue. Not only not what you're looking at, what you're describing, you're just clueless and helpless, and you don't know what. It's a mystery, and it's unbelievable. And that comes from paying more attention to it, not less. If I pay a little attention to it as a hand, so I can, like my activities with you and the glass of water, and saying, oh, here, take 5 grams of mushrooms. Like when I say it's provisional, what I say is it's the side effect of the way we communicate when we're. It's the way communication and that. It's just the way communication sort of been architected when we're not paying attention. That's what it comes from. That's where it's seeded from not paying attention. And when you say, well, it seems like you're doing all these things. Yes, in the third person, it seems that way. It will never look any different. A mystical experience also doesn't make, the ocean stop doing all of the things that we would sort of just expect. But it does change the underlying framework of the ocean somehow being discrete from Cain, and Cain being discrete from Jacques, and your computer screen somewhere being located in some other place. It does remove all those most basic things. So now if we get more complicated and get confused and talk about discrete glasses of water and discrete temperatures and discrete all those things, in that game, that game's going to play. Yeah, it's the game. I'm not trying to argue that the rules of chess are somehow, but it is true that there's no sense in which it's seen beyond, All right, well, why don't you go now? I keep rambling.
Well, okay. So based on what you said, it's like I think my reaction would be that, look, I'm currently playing that game, and I don't know if your claim is that you're no longer playing that game, or like you are playing the game, but you just have a different view of it from like the first personal point. Although actually, I suppose I guess there isn't really a distinction between first and third personal points of view once you've achieved the Zen state or whatever it is. So I'm not sure how to put this, but so certainly like there's this game which is taking place in provisional reality, and like I don't know, I just it seems like you are still engaging with that on some level, and I'm not sure how you get away from representing the world in various ways while doing that.
Well, let me sort of here. Okay, so I've got this like.
So actually, let's put it this way: you said yourself that from the third personal point of view, nothing really changes, and certainly like it seems like obviously we have I can't exactly say different beliefs, but like if I was to kind of talk to yourself and a bunch of other people, not about Zen, but just about like normal stuff, or just trees and cars or whatever, then it's like I wouldn't it seems like I wouldn't be able to know just on the basis of that conversation that you have this completely different view of things. And so I think this is like, I remember mentioning to you that when you initially said that descriptive knowledge is the wrong tool to access reality, I said, I'm not sure I care about accessing reality. You know, descriptive knowledge is what I want. Descriptive knowledge is the aim of my inquiry. So it seems weird to say it's the wrong tool. Like, are you saying that if I was to pursue Zen practice, that I just would no longer care about descriptive knowledge at all? Because you are stating propositions right now. Like, that was my point with, you know, when you said I could give you 5 grams of mushrooms. Like, that's a proposition. So,
yeah, I mean, making a proposition and caring about it are two different things, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I've got this thing. It's like it grips electronic boards for soldering, right? So I do like a soldering job. This thing grips it, and this magnifying glass helps me see the chips better, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you were, let's say you did. So I was going to say before you took a piss that that I'd done over 20,000 hours worth of meditation. So some people say mastery's 10,000 hours or so. I mean this is like a popular claim. You do people who seem to be masters at things have practiced 10,000 hours. So I've done like 20,000 hours of meditation. So my experience of this. Yeah, there's the third person sense in which I'm going to put a circuit board here and I'm going to look through this and solder the way that you would expect. But there's always something that's simultaneous with that at the same time. That it's always taking place in parallel with that, which is that this is utterly amazing and gorgeous and the most beautiful thing in the world, and in a way that's inexplicable and totally mysterious and not disconnected from anything else. And it takes place in parallel with the conventional usage of it. And what that, like, I should say, we had an email where you said, well, can I fly? Why can't I? Will I be able to fly if I do 20,000 hours of practice? Or what you'll be able to do is realize that sitting in this room right now is more amazing than flying. See, flying is amazing.
I do just want to clarify something. Like, the point of that question. I know. Yeah, that wasn't. Like, I know, you're not going to be able to change your capacities. My point was with regard to skepticism. It struck me that there was a disanalogy between the, like, say, dream hypothesis and the brain in a vat hypothesis and so on, where, like, when you wake up from a dream, you have different capacities from what you seem to have in the dream. Like, because maybe in a dream I can fly. Similarly, like, if you're a brain in a vat, if you were to, like, wake up from the fake reality and then realize that you're a brain in a vat, suddenly you would lose various capacities that you thought you had. Whereas the way that you had described Zen came across more as like a change of attitude. And actually that's how it's coming across here. Like when you said that, okay, you maybe have the propositional descriptions, but do I have to care about them? It's like, that's change of attitude. And that might be really important and significant, but it just struck me that was...
Yeah, it's not... No. It's that you're downplaying. Yeah, so it's more correct. I mean, there's more. This is a multifaceted thing. I mean, so it's really true to say that the best analogy is waking up from a dream. that's better than a change in attitude, because it completely overturns something. There's something that's sort of just been extinguished. You know, the thing, I think the reason that, you know, people don't focus scientific investigations on their dream worlds is because they disappear. I mean, like, you know, if our dream worlds were continuous, we would, when we go to sleep at night, we'd go to that world and we'd continue our investigations there, because there'd be continuity and all these sorts of things that we could investigate. But they're sort of ephemeral, and they vanish. I mean, you can remember some of them, but I'm just saying that there's a sort of general quality that they kind of get extinguished, and then you're here in this plane, or this all-encompassing place. But this place can be overturned, just like the dream. Now, if you were saying, like, I've got all this like philosophy and science that I did in this dream that doesn't exist, and listen to it. It's like, well, I mean, no one's going to listen to that guy. Like, you know, maybe someone will, but most people aren't going to listen to that guy. Like, they're concerned about, you know, the reality that seems like it has continuity to them, which is what I'm calling provisional reality. But the mystical experience has a higher resolution than this reality, and it has better continuity than this reality. So it has all the things that we're saying that make this somehow more have more salience than a dream, the mystical state has over this. So meaning, we're saying we've just, some dream I had, you know, so what dream did you have 16 days ago? Do you know? Or is it just gone?
Don't know.
It's gone, right? Do you care about it? I mean, is it like active in your life right now? Like you're organizing your life around your dream from 16 days ago, or it's just gone?
No, I don't care about it.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just saying salience seems to be tied to this kind of sense of continuity that the provisional world's giving everybody. If you access a place that makes the resolution of this place seem shoddy and just totally fraudulent, and also makes the continuity of this place seem fraudulent, then the more and more you're accessing that other space, it does the same thing that is done with a dream, where it's just disregarded. Now obviously we can play chess, or we can play philosophy, or we can play any game. It doesn't, you know, but it's unreal, but it doesn't. I'm not saying it's unreal like as a philosophical statement. I'm saying that it can be seen as unequivocally unreal, in the same way that, like, you're not going to retrieve your dream from 16 days ago. It's unretrievable. You can't retrieve it. It's just, you know, whether it's real or not, it's just become trivial and irrelevant.
Well, that's for
Same
me.
thing can happen to this.
Some people record their dreams and care a lot about them. I would also say that, like, I think that you can have, you know, knowledge of dreams and knowledge within dreams. So when I wake up from a dream, I mean, like, you know, I can now describe various things that happened in a dream. I mean, okay, I can't remember my dream from 16 days ago, but, you know, a dream from last night, I can talk about what happened in it, and I would say that counts as knowledge of the dream. So there can be knowledge, like, of the dream world, knowledge within the dream world, and that doesn't, you know, merely waking up and realizing that the dream is only one very small part of reality. I don't see that as actually really undermining that knowledge. Obviously there are certain things that, so like if I have a dream and I have various false beliefs in the dream, then okay, that part is undermined. But like,
oh well, you got to the point. That's the point.
Yeah, okay, but
so if you go to the mystical state, all of your beliefs that you've ever had, including that you're Cain, including that you're located somewhere, including just in fact, pick the most basic ones. That's more fun. The most basic beliefs you have are overturned.
Okay,
so they're just eliminated.
Right.
And then you're shown something that when you return to Kane, so when you return to the Kane state and in your room and you're, back engaged in what I'm calling provisional reality, it's just obvious that it's a cheap imitation and that what you've encountered is not it just shows that you don't know what you're talking about in some fundamental way.
Okay,
there's like some fundamental way where it almost like error theory. Like when you have these two glasses of water, it's like it's almost like moral error theory in the sense that like I don't you can have a moral conversation, but there's some sense in which you have a feeling like, yeah, this is a bunch of bullshit. Like, I mean, you can have those. You're not incapable of having moral conversation. You can have them, but there's some sort of fundamental feeling you have that it's a kind of a fraud, right? I mean,
so with the dream example, like I had a dream the other day where I dreamt that there was a purple cube, like floating down the road, and it was making the noise of a motorbike. So it was like I thought it was a motorbike. I turned and I saw a cube coming down the road. So I can describe like the appearances within that dream, and I can also say that like if I did certain things, if I like walked across the road, I would have come closer to the cube. Right, I can say things like that, and that seems true, and I would say that constitutes knowledge. There are certain beliefs I might have had that have been overthrown, but like that, it's not overthrowing. It's not like I'm overthrowing all of the beliefs. And so I don't know. The impression I have is that the same kind of thing is going on here, where like ultimately. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to talk about because, like,
well,
I know what you're going to say. So it's like you're going to say that no, right? You really do not like represent the world as containing two glasses or as containing hands or whatever. So, okay.
No, but okay, but see, yeah, but now the problem is if you make a claim that something's like psychologically impossible. Right, like skepticism or suspension of judgment or whatever. Right, You're saying that psychologically is just it's not attainable. It's not an attainable psychological condition. Right. So now I say okay. Well, I say you believe that. Here's these 5 dried mushrooms. Take them and see if you can at least temporarily see that you're mistaken. That at least temporarily that there's a psychological ceasing of all that activity that you're normally acquainted with. And also like what you were saying about the cube, like moving closer to a cube and moving farther away from it and the appearances. I am saying that the mystical state overturns fundamental things like distance. I'm saying it overturns things that are really basic. And I could give you 5 dried grams of mushrooms. You would take them. You would come back and you would agree all those things were overturned. Yes, it did seem that makes this place seem completely like a knockoff. It's just if you're saying it's not important for you to leave that room earlier in the conversation, but you're saying that we're at this impasse, it's sort of you're sort of supporting my idea that it's important for you to leave the room because the impasse is basically because you won't leave the room.
Okay.
Like
fine, yeah. Well,
and
like,
that's.
I mean, it's not like I mean, look, I'm a fallibilist. I could well be wrong in my judgment that it's psychologically impossible to suspend judgment about everything. I'm happy to accept that. It's just nothing that anybody has ever said to me has made it comprehensible, right? So, and maybe it would become comprehensible if I was to, I don't know, do like 20,000 hours of meditation or take the mushrooms. Obviously, I haven't done that yet, so I guess it'll have to.
I know.
It'll have to wait.
Yeah, I should. I want to say this too: is that if you if you do want to ever experience what I'm talking about, it's very important that you don't take a few mushrooms, like, because then you'll just have hallucinations or just different kind of things that schizophrenic people encounter.
I should say,
actually,
there's pretty much zero chance that I'm going to do this. I have like pretty serious, or at least I had pretty serious anxiety problems. I'm not comfortable taking. I don't want to have a bad trip. I'm terrified of that. So, yeah, I'm probably not going to take the mushrooms.
Yeah, I've had all the things that are that people get from mushrooms. There's nothing in the brain that those mushrooms are activating that can't be activated through meditation and through sober means. So there's no reason that you can't encounter these things soberly. In fact, actually, the first time that I ever had a mystical experience, I was 14 years old and I wasn't doing drugs. It just happened by like fluke. It just sort of happened. I don't know why. I didn't ask for it to happen. I wasn't interested in any of this stuff. In my background, by the way, like James Randi was like my childhood hero, and I loved debunking, debunking like stupid people who like fucking believe in crystals and or what, just debunking. Oh, you believe psychics can read your mind? Well, let's see how it actually works. And I made a living for a long time inventing magic tricks, which people don't know is actually a job. But you can actually make a living inventing tricks that they sell at like casinos in Las Vegas and stuff. They have little magic shops, and magicians buy tricks on the internet, and you can actually make a living doing it. So I had no reason to think as like a 14-year-old ultra materialist, like, James Randi Penn and Teller lover guy, that something, would just completely overturn all that stuff. It just didn't, but it didn't happen through drugs. It just, sometimes this just happens to people. I don't know. It's probably impossible to say what the catalyst for it is, but it just happens. And then, meditation can bring you to the exact same place. You don't need to do DMT. And DMT is like a distraction. It takes you through just a different world like this. The mystical experience is kind of distinct because, unlike taking you to another world, it clears out all your beliefs. It clears out anything that was comprehensible prior. And then you go, oh, wow, I don't know what I was talking about. So when I say, so the real issue I'm taking with your critique of skepticism is that it's just psychological experience for me. It just contradicts your notion that it's not possible. And I know that you could instantly be shown these things, and you would sort of be compelled to just go, yeah, just like putting those glasses on. I don't know, like, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't like upset you. Like, I just want to say too, if this gets uploaded or people watch it, that like, I am the Kane B fan. I've watched every video.
No, I'm not upset at all. I mean, I think that you've successfully changed my mind that it's psychologically impossible. The problem that I have is that, because what you're describing, I just can't make sense of it. But at the same time, I sort of have to some extent, defer to people's testimony, especially when I recognise that people have certain types of expertise that I don't have, or they've had, experiences that I haven't had. So, I mean, certainly I'm much less confident about the claim than I was before we started this conversation.
Wow, that's so nice of you to say that. Yeah, I mean, that's really kind. I mean, there's a lot of I have a Discord too where I debate all sorts of people for fun. But It's interesting. I feel like it's. I mean, man, maybe this is probably a personal question. Can I say something, or will it upset
I'm
you if I ask
totally
something?
unoffendable. Like seriously, you can ask whatever you want.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Me too. I want to make a bet that I'm more unoffendable than you. Um,
Okay.
but just the I was gonna say, like, so the anxiety thing is, does that still plague you, or did
Yeah.
you get over it?
It's something that I'm able to deal with now. It used to be the case that I would have panic attacks and I would think that I was about to die. I would think I was having a heart attack, and so that was really quite crippling. And I'm now able to sort of recognize what they are, and I can. It feels unpleasant, right? Like when it happens, because I have these very strong like physical sensations, like rapid heart rate and dizziness and so on. But like I feel them happening. I know what they are, and so I just sort of ride it out. And I find that when I used to have them, I think because I was terrified, they would just go on for ages. Like I would have a panic attack, and then it would start going, but then it would come on again in like waves. So they'd sometimes last for 30 minutes, an hour. When it happens these days, it's like this unpleasant reaction. It comes for a couple of minutes, and then it goes away because I know what it is. I mean, it's sort of like, for me, I now see it as being a bit like, I don't know, vomiting, right? I mean, vomiting is an unpleasant experience, but it's not the end of the world. You don't think you're about to die. So I think that
Isn't it?
in
I don't know
control
if you
of
agree
that.
with this, but when you when you were did you notice the distinction between, like, when you were a child and had to vomit, it was really bad, and then as you got to be an adult, you're like, like. But I have this distinct memory of one day vomiting wasn't so bad, and then but when I was a child, it was basically the worst thing I could imagine was to vomit. Like, I thought, this is just hard. Like, it was horrifying. And
Opposite for
then
me.
it somewhere it changed. Really, it got worse as
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got older.
It didn't really bother me much when I was a kid. Um, as an adult, like I really like feel it. I feel like it's painful. So I don't remember, and I could be. This could just be like I'm not remembering my experience as a kid. I don't have a very good memory, actually, at least not for this kind of thing. But as far as I recall, when I was a kid, like I don't remember the physical pain of it, and that's a very significant part of the experience now. So yeah, I'd say it's worse.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. So maybe this would be a good. I could bring this up. So, like, obviously, obviously, one of the worst things that you can ever have happen to you by conventional standards is to be given a terminal cancer diagnosis, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, that's pretty bad. You're gonna have to sit and think about your slow death. So
Mm.
it's not good by conventional standards, right? I'm not making a moral claim here. I'm just saying, between people or whatever, it doesn't seem good. Um, so what I think is interesting about mysticism that I think gives it even more credibility is, if you say there's very few things you can say in the face of death that actually makes people feel any better about it. Where you go, oh, like, you say some sort of thing on an inspirational calendar, it tends not to help. In fact, psychologists will talk about this problem of the fact that the terminally ill are essentially inconsolable. Like, what are you going to say? You're going to say, look forward to your bright future? That doesn't make any sense. So,
Hmm.
like, all the things that we can conventionally offer people, and then if you say God or something else, people go, no one, it's hard to believe that stuff. Even the people who believe it, you can, if you talk to them enough, it seems like maybe they don't really believe it, right? So it's just very hard to deal with it. And if you look at uh, when they give terminally ill people high dosages of psychedelics with the explicit intent of giving them a mystical experience, meaning the intent is to give the terminally ill patient a mystical experience. The numbers, and this has been replicated actually many times, the numbers are as high as 85% of the people who have this experience completely lose their fear of death. They completely lose it. They totally lose it, and they say that they can actually die they can die happy knowing that whatever they saw is, it doesn't have to be put into like a religious context. It's just there was this engagement with something that overturned this reality in a way that makes the largeness of death not seem so like, oh my God, like that panic of I'm like spiraling towards the abyss. Because there's a sense in which the mystical experience shows you the abyss. You get to encounter the abyss and you see something that fundamentally changes your mind about it in a way you can't unsee. Now, if there's no difference between descriptive and tacit knowledge, then I should just be able to explain my mystical experiences to a terminally ill patient, and they should go, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. I can face the abyss now. It doesn't work like that, though. You got to actually get them to go see the place that sort of completely overthrows this place, and then they can come back and go, all right, the abyss is not so bad. This is there was this one lady, it was really funny. She had an account of a mystical experience where she was this atheist woman, and she said, it's like I spent hours bathing in God's love, and God's love was made of nothingness. And the people said to her afterwards, they said, wait, are you still an atheist? And she said, yeah, I'm still an atheist. And they said, well, why would you use the word God's love? And she said, because we don't have words big enough. We don't have language big enough. And she goes, so I just defaulted to the word God because there's just not a big enough word. I thought it was interesting, though. She said, bathed in God's love that was made of nothingness.
Yeah.
But like, I'm sorry if this conversation annoys you, Kane. I just I think it's a testament to say
why I said it didn't annoy me. I wasn't
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's a false reading of your body language. I was just going to say that, like, death, that's an extreme anxiety attack. Even really strong people, like, you tell them they're going to die, and then they start having panic attacks. So if we have a tacit tool that can actually, like, disabuse you of your death anxiety, that's amazing. And the question is, why should it do that and a description of it not work? Let's say we just got the perfect description of how great this mystical experience was, and we just give it to terminal cancer patients and have them read it and have them try to imagine it really hard, and they just keep being scared of their impending doom. So why is it that when they leave the house and go outside and see outside, that when they go back in their house and die, they go, I saw the sun, I saw a cloud, I get it, it's good. Sorry. I'll let you comment on.
Well, I from what you've said, it sounds like you couldn't put it in descriptive terms. So that would be why a descriptive account of it would not be able to alleviate their fear, right?
Yeah, but I don't think I ever got to the bottom of whether you see like ineffability as a paradox, or if you think that ineffability is perfectly fine, or I don't know what your sensibilities are on that.
Well,
topic.
I think there's a lot of stuff that's ineffable. I see ineffability as a fairly kind of mundane phenomenon. Like I mentioned earlier, even stuff like an experience of redness, I can't express all of that descriptively. So, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by ineffability, right? But I take ineffability to mean like something that can't be expressed in descriptive terms. So if you're looking at it that way, then yeah, seems fairly. That just seems like part of our everyday experience for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, let me say this about Dennett, because I wanted to answer, because you said something about like his descriptive claims not making sense anymore. And I thought that there is a more straightforward, actual descriptive way to kind of say why his claims wouldn't make sense. Like there's a more conventional way of saying it. I don't know if you're interested in hearing it, but I thought it might be worthwhile because we brought up Dennett earlier. So like Dennett and the Churchlands. So in this, there's scientific evidence on this now. It's not just a personal claim I'm making. People who meditate for a really long time, so I'm talking like 10, 20, 30, like thousands of hours, it alters your experience of deep sleep completely. It changes something about deep sleep in a way that is very profound and it's almost unnervingly profound and weird. So normally, or I would say most people, their impression of deep sleep is kind of like a blank interval. It's kind of like, it's just a non-interval. Like I was here, it's like a jump cut.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, does that follow so far? Like that's kind of most people's impression of deep sleep?
That's how it is to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a kind of change that happens to where there's like a non-personal awareness that carries through in deep sleep and is like sort of like non-temporal. It's very weird. It feels like an eternal kind of awareness at zero, like absent everything. So absent sensory experience, absent the notion of a self or a vantage point, or there's anything you could fill in. It's just absent all of that. But there's just a fundamental seemingness, non-personal. It doesn't attach to your memories or to anything that you would say was Kane or Jacques or whoever else, right? It's just a sort of non-personal seemingness that persists. And it's very unusual. and I would say it's if you go on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, in the mystical experience section of it, they have a section called a pure consciousness event.
Yeah.
Right. And there's like speculation about that. And that's so deep sleep transforms from being a blank interval to being a pure consciousness event. And the most peculiar part about it, to me, the thing that is the most amazing thing about it, is that you realize that you've always experienced this. Like there's a sort of retroactive realization that I never didn't experience this. I always experienced this. My attention was like mismanaged. My attention was so focused on things and objects and sensory impressions that I had no frame of reference to notice it. Just like that card. You don't notice the black four of hearts because your attention is just is mismanaged. So to bring this back to Dennett and the Churchlands and things, is that so this pure consciousness event thing, it persists under surgery too. So you get knocked out for surgery and it still persists. It's just this. It's kind of, I think one of the best words you could use for it would be like an alive nothingness. I know it sounds insane. This is a poetic way of putting it.
I'm alive sure.
Nothing, an awake.
I know that this is not what you meant, but I feel like kind of saying By the way, if you do this, then next time you go into surgery, you're going to be kind of aware during the duration of it. That doesn't sound so appealing.
Yeah. No. But yeah.
I know.
But
I know.
I'm not saying that because I'm talking about a zero state that's absent any sensory or tactile impressions. It's absent time. It's absent identity and memory. It's just kind of like whatever seemingness would be if we stripped away every element and just got to sort of like a bare, I heard, Colin McGinn. Do you read any of his work or?
Yeah.
Mysterianism. He's that guy. Yeah. So I'm a bit. He was like one of my heroes as a teenager. Like I just loved his work. I love that guy. Like his writing. He's a really beautiful writer too. I don't know why I'm advertising, like saying how great he is, but he has a thought experiment kind of. He has thought experiments which kind of get to this idea, which is like, imagine if we put you in a sensory deprivation tank and gave you like a strong amnesia pill, but you were kept awake. So now you have no memory, you have no point of reference, you have no sensory experience, you have no tactile sensation, but you're awake. And then he kind of asks us to imagine, well, what's the difference between that and just not being awake? Is there a difference? Is there a distinction? And I think meditation allows you to pay attention carefully enough to where you disabuse yourself of sort of cultural notions of identity and location and sensory impressions to the point where there's a sensitivity to this. And when I think about the fact that it doesn't go away during surgery or the fact that it doesn't go away during deep sleep, it opens the kind of question about what consciousness is and whether it fits any of the parameters that neuroscience are using to try to sort of solve the problem, or if they're sort of the way they're defining it is in conventional terminology, which actually excludes some sort of conscious phenomenon because it's prejudiced towards metacognition or towards sensory cognition. So I wonder if Dan Dennett or like the Churchlands could have a pure consciousness event if they would really think that consciousness is somehow really just the sum of, I don't know, functionality or I'm familiar with their arguments, but not as familiar as you are. But I just wonder like how in any way that would be compatible with what they're trying to say.
I'm not that familiar with their arguments.
I don't know. Maybe you could.
By the way, it's been a long time since I've done philosophy of mind, and I've forgotten 99% of it. So, yeah, I really don't know much about that anymore.
I was waiting for you to give a big speech. Going to I thought you were going to do like a whole video right here about philosophy of mind.
No, I've completely Unfortunately, I don't really have very good retention of the stuff that I learn. I haven't really read philosophy of mind in so long, and part of the reason why was because that was a case where I genuinely did end up just suspending judgment, and I couldn't figure out a way of making progress forward. I am totally agnostic about whether it seems to me plausible that something like panpsychism could be true. It also seems to me totally plausible that maybe consciousness, although actually on the basis of this conversation, maybe it's a little less plausible, but it did seem to me quite plausible that maybe consciousness was just limited to, very sophisticated, entities that could use language and so on, and were able to kind of, like the higher order thought theories, you need to have thoughts about thoughts in order to be conscious. So I was in a state of total agnosticism about all of these views of consciousness, and then I just sort of lost interest, I guess. I wasn't able to, I didn't even have any inclination, and so for that reason I ended up focusing on things other than philosophy of mind. I think my views in other areas changed such that it sort of didn't matter what was going on from the first person point of view. So you know, like so like when it comes to say my views on like which entities have moral status, well, for me that's just a matter of which entities are capable of formulating rules and acting in accordance with rules, for instance, that kind of thing. It doesn't matter what's going on inside the head. It doesn't matter what the phenomenal experience is like. So yeah, the whole like philosophy of mind just became less important to me, and it's been many years since I've done anything on it.
Now, what's your intuitions about just like, you know, like an external world?
I think,
meaning like so as an empiricist, like, so you know, when just to be clear, I'm not, you know, I'm not getting my PhD in philosophy, so I may say a few inaccurate things here, but like you know, when you know, Kant or Plato, you know, they're talking about some sort of outside world that, you know, we don't have access to. I don't see how that's not metaphysical. Like, it seems totally outside empiricism. Am I right with that intuition, or is that wrong?
Wait, sorry. What's incompatible with empiricism? The claim that there's
just
not...
like see, so like when people talk about like matter, right?
Yeah.
Like totally outside of experience, right?
Yeah.
It seems like we're talking about something in which our empirical inquiry is never really going to verify one way or the other.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we just talk about
yeah, I mean,
you're the philosopher, so I have to defer to you on this.
I think that the empiricist tradition is pretty skeptical of materialism and physicalism, and like it would regard those as being metaphysical frameworks. So yeah, like, I mean, it's hard to say though, because like, you know, there are degrees of empiricism. I mean, you know, Berkeley was one of the great British empiricists, but he believed in God and used God in order to supply like as a kind of explanatory tool, which is that seems totally incompatible with empiricism. But we still regard him as an empiricist because he had a whole load of other views that were basically in line with it. So, you know, it's like I'm inclined to agree with Van Fressen that empiricism is more like a stance than a set of beliefs. But I would say that it's a stance that is at least tricky to make compatible with like materialism and physicalism and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so like now, but your general intuition about, like, you know, an external world, like outside, I guess, Kane B. You know, what's your just general intuition about? I mean, obviously you can use all the knowledge that you've acquired through philosophy, but I'm just saying, what's your take on it? Or you just see it as meaningless? Or
I suppose my inclination is to, my inclination would be to see it as meaningless. So I like to kind of think of it in terms of, you know, the whole like experience machine thought experiment. Like I obviously would get into an experience machine. I've mentioned this before, but part of the reason why I would do that, well, maybe this isn't part of the reason, but even so, one of the things that I am inclined to say about the experience machine is that it just counts as a real world. Actually, David Chalmers has this really nice article called "The Matrix as Metaphysics," where he makes this point that it seems like, you know, when we're talking about like trees and cars and so on, you know, you can talk about these objects without making any assumption about what their like underlying nature is actually like. And in that case, when people imagine like, oh well, maybe we're all in the Matrix, it doesn't mean that there are no, that it turns out actually trees don't exist. No, trees do exist. It's just that on a kind of metaphysical level, they're just like computer code or something like that. So, do you want to say that that's an external world? Well, I'm not sure the question really matters. There are various objects that we can interact with. I, as an empiricist, am inclined to say I have no idea what the underlying structure and nature of reality behind the phenomena is, and it really doesn't matter that much to me. So, yeah, when I think about these like skeptical hypotheses, like the brain in the vat or the matrix or whatever, I just think like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me.
What can I ask you a question? What if like that I mean I already sort of have a kind of suspicion about this, but I'd like to see what you would think. So, like what you were saying earlier about like your problems with like anxiety and panic attacks, right?
Mm.
Like what if they were tied hand in hand in some like deep way with like your with your disinterest, like if there was a way to wake up from this reality, right? And your disinterest in doing so was actually related sort of deeply to anxieties and these sort of like, different pains that you experience psychologically. Would you be more interested in the prospect of leaving the Matrix if it like worked to sort of alleviate those psychological issues?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the end, I want my life to go as best as possible, and for me, that is a matter of having pleasant experiences, like pleasant, rich, fulfilling experiences. So, if it was possible for me to eliminate the anxiety attacks, then that would certainly go in the pro column. Of course, there might be costs. I mean, if you're leaving the Matrix, then maybe you're going to wake up in a world that's worse in various respects. And actually, my anxiety doesn't bother me that much anymore. These days, as I mentioned, I see my anxiety attacks when they happen as being like these unpleasant physical sensations, but it's not really a big deal. They're annoying, but they don't really bother me that much anymore. But
there's a commentator. I'm trying to remember their name. Marshall Salins. They use this. They came up with this expression. The road to Zen affluence, I think, was the expression that they came up with. And in fact, yeah.
Anthropologist,
Yes. Okay, so the road to Zen affluence is basically like, I know, just to be clear, I know that your thing about flying in that email doesn't have to do with what I'm about to say. Like what you mentioned about flying was in a different context. I agree with that. All right. But like the temptation at all to say like, if a bunch of cool things happen to me, right, my experiences in my life is just going to be better, right? I'm going to have a more enriched, like better life if like all these cool events take place. Part of what Zen, besides waking you up from reality, Zen's also sort of walking you through the fact that the reason that you don't have an ongoing, awesome, pleasant experience is because at some point you started taking for granted just the very act of sitting in this room. You at one point said, fuck this shit. Like, I want something exciting. I want to fly. I want to, see some amazing work of art or listen to some, awesome, avant-garde jazz record.
Yeah.
Right. Because this isn't good enough. But there was a time when the sight of this room, I mean, maybe you were a toddler. I don't know how far back in time we'd have to go. But there was a time when this was amazing, like totally amazing and like new. And there's a mental story that keeps going, that this isn't new, it's not amazing, it's not mysterious and wonderful. And the question is, does that story have to do with reality, or does that story have to do with our idealized labels? And when you work through a Zen practice, you find out that it has to do with the idealized labels. Like that, what's causing you to see this as mundane is a story. It's like a narrative that you're telling yourself over and over again. Mm-hmm. But it's not actually the case. This room actually is utterly mysterious and fucking weird and totally cool. But it's just not it's been hidden for some reason. It's right there, but just you take it for granted. So I mean, do you have any interest at all in like the concept that it's possible to take things for granted for no good reason?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with this. Obviously, I don't see. So the fact that something is amazing to somebody, I'm like, I don't see that as like a property of the external world. That depends on how the person looks at it. So it is absolutely a function of like the way I'm thinking about the room that I'm not amazed by this room. And I suppose if it were possible for me to like just take a pill or something and immediately experience this stuff as amazing, then it would be very appealing. Obviously the problem with the Zen thing is that it requires quite a lot of work, and at that point I then have to think, well, there are other things I'm interested in, other things I, might want to do with my time.
Yeah.
So it becomes a little bit more difficult to, say whether that would be worthwhile to me. But I mean, I don't disagree with the general point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might be important too, because like if we post this, I just wanted to like say that, Zen is not really, it's not like other Buddhisms in the sense that there's not like really like a requirement to believe anything. You don't have to believe anything. And in fact, it's not even recommended. Like they don't say like believe in a past life or believe that.
I thought the whole point was that you're not going to have any beliefs. Like it's going to end up in suspension.
No, but I mean, but Buddhism. No, what I'm saying is, if people are viewing this, sometimes there's a tendency to conflate Zen and Buddhism as if though they're exactly equivalent.
Yeah.
When really, historically, Zen came from sort of a combination of Taoism and Buddhism, sort of put together and stripped of a lot of I'd call it like religious accessorizing. There's a lot less religious accessorizing. Like that stuff's all just sort of been strained out of Zen in a way that is not true of other Buddhisms. In other Buddhisms, there really are metaphysics, that are weird and unaccounted. You can't account for them, And I just wanted to point out, Zen doesn't share the spookiness with other forms of Buddhism. It's not like you're not sort of required to to believe anything that seems like complete nonsense. I mean, maybe you think radical skepticism is complete nonsense, so maybe that changes it. But one thing before I get off with you, can I do one little thought experiment with you and see what you think about it?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, so the temptation to think that there's an objective world sort of outside subjectivity, right? What do you, like if we looked at like very fundamental elements that bring that notion about, would you say, I mean, my sort of impression is that continuity does all the work. The only reason that we're tempted to say that at all is because you walk away from something and you walk back and it seems like it's the same thing as there. So it's like continuity does all the lifting that would tempt us to sort of say that there's a world outside subjectivity, where there's something objective. I don't know. Could you maybe talk about like what you think motivates people to think that? I don't know if you think it or.
I think it probably has to be grounded on continuity. I'm not sure what else there could be. See, I'm inclined to think that, like, in a sense there's more, because I think one important part of this is like triangulating with other people. So, you know, like I can see a cup in front of me and then I can ask somebody else, like, and they see the cup and they describe it in the same sort of way that I would be inclined to describe it. And so that makes me think, okay, like there's a distinction between stuff that happens where like I'm the only one that can experience that. Like when, say, I have an after image or something, you know, look at a light, look away, I've got an after image, nobody else is like experiencing that. And the cup where I'm triangulating with other people, it seems like that has to play a role in this concept of objectivity. But even that ultimately is going to be grounded on just plain continuity and coherence, because, you know, what's the reason for assuming that there is another person, you know? So
yeah, and also too, like dreams, you know, like I've had plenty of triangulation happen in dreams where I've actually had people confirm to me that they're saying like, yeah, I saw. They're saying they saw an event that they're not even they're not real at all, but they're saying that they saw some event I saw, and we both agree that we saw this event. So it seems to me that, like, would you agree that, like, so here's the thought experiment has two parts. So the first part of it would be, if we found ourselves in a reality where like dreams were just slightly different, right? Where they were always episodic for everyone. Like everyone had episodic dreams that always had continuity. Let's say all the characters in your dream are people I wouldn't recognize, and all the characters in my dream are people you wouldn't recognize, but still the characters are always the same each night we go to sleep. And then when we wake up, here you are and here I am. I think that philosophically, like if we were born into that world, I think it would be very difficult to take credibility away from the dream world. Like if we were going to say that this world has external components to it that are objective, how would we escape that in the dream context when it's episodic and just, you know, has continuity? Would you think that we would just say like, oh yeah, that's just this world 2? Like I go to sleep, then I'm in world 2, and then I wake up to world 1. Or,
yeah. Well, I mean,
do you think that it would fundamentally?
I don't know if I necessarily want to comment on what other people would say about it, but that's what I would say about it. I would just treat the dream world as another world, and I would treat it as having the same kind of status and importance as, you know, the waking world. I mean, I guess I wouldn't talk about dreams and waking. They would just be like different worlds.
Just be exiting and going from different worlds. Now, but do you think? I know you're saying like that's the way that you would feel about it, but doesn't it seem like, based on the logic that other people would use to discredit the dream, it's like the logic they're using to discredit it is continuity based, and the dreams are delivering that exact continuity that they're getting here. So I'm just trying to see like on what basis that they would be able to make that discrimination. You know, it's like, you're really just, do you think that they would have a good reason?
Well, no. I mean, I don't. In any case, I'm not persuaded by the continuity responses to external world skepticism. So,
okay. But so now, like, if we maybe for the viewers who are, if we, I try to imagine too, like, let's say we did the thought experiment in reverse, right? Where there was a world that where we were in, where there was just agreement, there was no paradoxes, it was just very like cut and dry. There weren't really like mysteries. And then you went to sleep at night and you entered this world where there's paradoxes, mysteries, uncertainty, like disagreement. And then you wake up back in that world where there's just only agreement and continuity, like, and just there's just a cleaner continuity.
Yeah.
I wonder if you had grown up in that society, if you would just think this was completely unreal. You would just go, "What?
Yeah.
People disagreed." And
I mean, it's I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's difficult for me to say how I would react to that, just because, like, a world where there's no disagreement, what would that be like? It feels like that might have to be a very simple kind of world. So I wonder if we would then be inclined to draw comparisons to, like computer games and stuff, or fictions. Like, I wonder if we would then make the comparison that way, where it's like, okay, so this is a much simpler sort of world, and we therefore have reason to think it's constructed in the same way. Because, I mean, there is a point where it's like, like I'm thinking of design arguments here. When people say that something is evidence of design, very often it's like things that are structured in very simple ways. Like if I come across a perfectly spherical boulder or something like that, then I'm going to be more inclined to think that this can't be a product of just natural processes. This is something that's being constructed. And so I wonder if there was this simple world with agreement, where no disagreement. I wonder if you might have that kind of account of it. I don't know. I guess it depends on the details of how that world works.
yeah, I'm just very interested in how when you really like sort of, I was trying to see like what is like what are fundamental underpinnings to like why people believe specific things, and I feel like continuity sits under a lot. Like it seems like even, I mean, there's different ways that you could frame this, but even like to go through a logical proof, it requires that you stay aware of the process that you're sort of meant to, like your cognition is sort of engaging with rationality, and that's all functioning sort of in, I don't want to say it's a forward motion, because I don't really like things about cause and effect. I'm not convinced by those things, but I'm just saying, like, it seems like, what do you find anything that, like, I mean, clearly I'm not a foundationalist, right? Let's say hypothetically, Kane, you had to be a foundationalist, right? Like we have a gun to your head now. You must be a foundationalist. What would you like? What kind of things would you place at that foundation base? I'm always interested in hearing what like people see as like really hard to.
So I suppose I'd probably accept. I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily going to count as like foundationalism though, but I'd probably say, well, I accept a kind of phenomenal conservatism where, as if it seems to be the case that P, then that gives you, in the absence of defeaters, justification for thinking that P. And so the foundations would just be the like immediate seemings, but they're not indubitable foundations. So that's why I'm not sure whether you'd want to count that as being like really.
Yeah, because it seems like there's like a. Yeah, it seems like you're like sneaking like a fallibilism in there or something.
Oh, definitely. It's not being snuck in. It's there. If you want indubitable foundations. I don't know. I think the thing is that if I was going to have to be an indubitable, like, so if you want the indubitable foundations, then I suppose it would just be descriptions of features of immediate experience. Like that seems like probably the best option, and maybe some like very, very simple kind of definitional statements, like all bachelors are unmarried or something like that. But the problem is you can't really do anything with them. I don't think you can get anywhere with statements like that. If that's all you have access to, I don't see that there's any way of like building up the rest of your knowledge. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have to say, like, I really enjoyed that video on was it volunteerist epistemology? That's Van Frassen too, right?
Hmm.
Uh, is it called volunteerism? How's it pronounced?
Voluntarist, I would say. Voluntarism, voluntarist.
Voluntarist?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you said, now are you, from watching that video, I couldn't tell. Would you consider yourself a modified volunteerist in the sense that you kind of like maybe are more on Grand Priest, more on the page with Grand Priest that like, yeah, we can overturn thing, we can maybe have dialethy and things of that type.
Yep, absolutely. So
Um,
yeah, I think that I want to be some sort of voluntarist, and I'm trying to work out a position that makes sense. I'm not sure I've succeeded in that. I think Van Frassen's position is consistent, but I'm really not happy with the idea that like it's going to just turn out to be irrational if you try to modify the logic. I think we have to allow the rationality of logical revisions. So, yeah, I mean, the basic idea is going to be that sets of beliefs are rational provided they don't sabotage their own possibility of vindication. And then, within that, it's like it's a matter of the will, or it's a matter of emotion or inclination. What you believe. We all have to just kind of take stabs in the dark, and many of those are going to be wrong, but that's fine. Like that's just the position we're in. Some of us will be more bold. Some of us will be more cautious, but ultimately, we've got to do that. Or maybe I shouldn't say we've got to do that, because I'm now more inclined to think that, okay, maybe suspending judgment is psychologically possible, but maybe some of us want to do it, right? So yeah, but part of that is going to also be taking stabs at different logical systems, and so yeah, I'm still like trying to work out my exact epistemological position, but it's some sort of voluntarism.
yeah, I want to say something that may, it might blow your mind because it's just, so I work, I do Zen training under, guys like an old guy, a master guy, whatever. But I'll talk to, he doesn't know anything really. He knows a little bit about Western philosophy, but not, he couldn't have the conversation we're having. So things come up as you go through Zen training. And he explained this thing once that sort of descriptively nothing descriptively gets to the heart of Zen. That's really put forward, that you can't explain, it's inexplicable, it escapes all logical attempts to capture it. That's the whole point of it. But what he was explaining to me, if you were forced to say what it was, it is like the probably the most shocking belief to I don't know, it's like a realist or even an anti-realist. What he was saying, that what he was saying actually sounded like if radical skepticism and trivialism were like glued together.
Yeah.
And it was perfectly fine, because whatever, dialethy, paradox, who gives a shit? But it was so funny how what he was describing in our Western philosophy language really would be a hybrid of radical skepticism and trivialism glued together, which sounds like probably the most radical, insane idea of all time. But, he was saying it gets to, it's kind of like at the heart of what Zen's pointing to. Are you familiar with trivialism? Like, have you?
Oh yeah. I think there's only, I mean, as far as I know, only one defender of it in like the Western tradition. So yeah, not a huge amount of literature there, but it's fascinating position. One of the things I find, so I think one of the things I really like about it, and it's obviously something that I find incomprehensible. But there's this really clever argument where his name's Paul Cabet, I think. I might be pronouncing that wrong. But he makes this point. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, is it about how basically every statement is a contribution to it, sort of?
Yeah, it's that everybody is already a trivialist, and so like It's like, hey, I don't actually need to make any kind of argument because anything you say is going to just affirm, right, the trivialist position. So there's no way of you even denying trivialism. So you're all already trivialists, and therefore already agree with me. Yeah, I like that. It's a clever argument.
Yeah, I think what the Zen master was saying kind of goes back to your glasses of warm water point, which is that what I was trying to say to you is that there's something happening in parallel, right? There is the sense in which it's totally normal, but at the exact same time, in equal proportion, it's not anything like it seems in the most visceral way, in a way that's more visceral than the glasses themselves. But then there is a sense in which they're just glasses. So his point about it being Zen being sort of the meeting point of radical skepticism and trivialism is that exact point, that sort of in parallel we have a warm glass of water and we also have a complete mystery that we could never get our minds around if we tried for an eternity. And they sort of they occupy the same mutual space.
Yeah,
I don't know if my interpretation of that kind of being a hybrid of those two positions makes sense to you, but
it's difficult because I think the thing that I'm still getting stuck on is like, right, I feel like I could accept all of this, but then I would still say that I have knowledge of the glasses of water. It would just be like, so there's this world, this provisional world, and I have knowledge of that, but then also in addition, there's this whole other space, or this whole other way of seeing things. I'm like, that might be like really great and incredible, and it might make me see things in a completely different way, but there's still the glasses of water. That's how it's coming across to me.
Well, I would say, like, are you completely fine? Are you completely fine with the fact that, like, they're in total contradiction, and that's fine? I mean, sir, I don't know. So when I talk to certain people, I'm sure you've gotten this too. I saw some talk you did with perspective philosophy, and he seemed resistant to like really radical kind of ideas on logic. But like, if you I like to talk to him sometimes. If you accept dialetheism, and if you accept that that something's an absolute paradox, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think maybe we would agree. There's some deep sense in which we would agree. Like, I actually think that we could come to some sort of agreement on your end. Like, I could come to sort of agree with you if you're accepting that it's okay that it's like a total paradox, and that's fine, and there's not really a problem with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that. It's just I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure why you would be happy with that because it's so. In order to have a dialetheia, you've got to have a proposition that is both true and false. At least that's my understanding. And yet it seems that what you have in the case where you have the two glasses, but then you have this whole other experience that is provided by the Zen state. Is if that's non-descriptive, then where's the contradiction coming from? It's not going to be a contradiction in propositional terms.
Yeah, because
is it?
Well, no, I mean, okay, let me try. Man, I have to be careful what I say, dude. Out of the dude's never watching this video, so I can actually just say whatever I want. But I was gonna say, like, because I want to speak accurately on Zen's behalf, right?
Yeah.
And not just always say like, the Zen state that I'm talking about is the true state of the glass and everything in totality.
Okay.
That's what it really is intrinsically. Almost like, in like Russellian monism, it's like, because we don't know the is of matter, you might as well just fill that is in with what we got. Like, why would we, why are we going to just get some abstraction? We might as well use the is. I think that's Russell's point. I don't know. I could be wrong. But like, so in Zen, the utter mysteriousness is the glass's true state, and it's not discrete. Meaning, I can't say where the boundary of this glass is. Any boundary I put on it is by fiat. It's totally made up. It's a fiction. And the true state of it is utterly mysterious, right? And mystical, right? So now when I generate a glass by fiat and a boundary by fiat, like okay, I have to make one more. Sorry, man, I'm not a philosopher, so you have to forgive me sometimes if there's a little muddling in what I'm doing.
No, it seemed it's cool. Like, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of books, but I'm not going to get a degree in this. So the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so you must be familiar with the old Zen thing about the finger and the moon, right? Where there's the moon and then there's the finger pointing to it. And don't mistake the finger for the moon.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like, if you mistake the finger from the moon, you miss all the heavenly glory, is the point. Is that you're not accessing the sort of mystical quality of the moon on account of paying too much attention to the finger. But if you don't do Zen training, there's an additional step that goes beyond that story, which is that it's not just that the moon is mystical and utterly mysterious. The finger that's pointing to also is. This is also an utter mystery. So it's to say, what Zen would say is that the fiat boundaries called glass are also an utter mystery, just like the pointing finger is. It's also a mystical mystery that is not contained or bounded. It's unlimited. It doesn't really have a discrete boundary. The word glass and the word, and the concept, that too is just like the glass in the sense that if you really are paying attention to it, you realize you understand nothing about it. So what I'm trying to say is Zen it's stepping back one step, I think, from like where we're getting caught in this conversation is you're saying, well, no, my idea glass provisionally still follows like just the same as it always did. But what I'm saying is Zen is stepping one step back from that and saying the provisional world too is captured by this mystical mysteriousness that's just can't be captured. It's included. It's not discluded. It's not another thing. Because what Zen's trying to show you is that there's no discrete things. Discreteness is a fraud. It's just not something that's actually part of reality. And in fact, words themselves that sort of point to discreteness they're part of that fraud. They're included. Just like the glass is included. They don't escape the vacuum. The black hole sucks them in too.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sorry if I went completely off the rails here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to really get this clear.
I'm like a thoroughly constructivist about observables. I mean, my general position, if I like had to summarize it, would be anti-realist about unobservables, constructivist about observables. So, I already agree. I mean, I don't know if I see it in quite the same way, but I already agree that when we talk about glasses and water in the glass, and when we ascribe properties to the water and so on, like we are drawing boundaries, and we are making idealizations, and we are abstracting. So like when we sort of say like there are two glasses, that's like this process of abstraction where we're kind of simplifying things and treating them, etc., etc. There's all of these constructive activities going on, and that's how we end up being presented with a world of things with properties. So I mean, like, I guess I'm coming to this conclusion in a different way, but it seems like a similar sort of conclusion.
Yeah, I would say it kind of reminds me of like imagine if we were seeing like a magician performing, right? And at one point a lemon is vanished, so he's holding the lemon, it's vanished, right? And then you look away for a second, but I actually just see this mistake where the lemon falls out of this guy's sleeve. Like it just falls out. There's no, like, I'm not sort of just, it's not really a descriptive thing. Like I'm actually seeing this event where this idiot magician made a mistake and a lemon falls out of his sleeve that supposedly got vanished, right? You didn't see it fall out. Now later you go home and you think about the trick and you sort of deconstruct like where the lemon was, all the available points that the lemon could have been placed. And then you go, the lemon must have been placed in the sleeve because the hand's here, the sleeve's here. There's no other point at which, the lemon could be placed unless we're breaking the laws of physics. And you just figure out. And then we have lunch the next day. And I say, that the lemon wasn't vanished. It was in the guy's sleeve. And you say, yeah, I know that too. It was in the guy's sleeve. And then we talk about how we know this. And I say, well, yeah, you saw the thing where the lemon just fell out of the guy's sleeve. And then you go, no, I didn't see that. I didn't see that at all. I went home and I constructed a theory and, and then we just arrive at this equal conclusion. But I would say, though, that one's more efficient than the other in some sense, because all that was required from me was to just see a lemon fall out of a sleeve. I didn't have to do anything. After that, I didn't have to go on and create a theory. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. So what's funny is that what you're saying about constructivism and the stuff about unobservables, what's so weird is that, so in terms of philosophy, my favorite philosophy stuff has always been the philosophy of science. So we completely share that. Like I said, like Against Method, one of my favorite books ever. So we have this kind of kinship in this area. But what's weird is that I had these mystical experiences that were very strong earlier in my life. And they just, what's weird is they instantly give you the answer that things like constructivism are talking about. But it just handed to you without any, it's handed to you without any thought process. You're just shown directly. You're like, yeah, this is all made up. A glass is not really there the way that, society's told you. It's completely like the sense of it being a thing by fiat is directly shown to you in a way that's so much more compelling than this reality is. And then when we come back to talk about it, we say the same stuff. But I do feel like, let's say I would hire a virgin sex therapist. I feel like even if I hired them, I would still be sort of urging them, like, come on, have sex already. Like, I just want you to do it so that you, like, I know it's probably pointless, but so that I feel like this need when there's people I admire like you, for being such like a great educator, and I think like you're truly like a really great educator, and I think like this guy, he sees, like, we see all the same stuff, but I want him to not be a virgin sex therapist so bad. I don't know why. I can't figure it out.
I should say that I kind of like engaging in the theoretical stuff and thinking about things in that way. So, I suppose it maybe is less efficient, but I enjoy it. So, you know, yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I was to engage in Zen, it would help me. I think that's pretty plausible, and it might have a profound effect on me. I'll be honest. Like, it's probably not going to happen though. At least not anytime soon. I'm probably not
Hey,
going
do you
to put in
think
the work.
you think that if you knew that you were gonna die, right?
I am going to die.
Like, so let's say you.
I do know that.
No, no. Well, I mean, remember, if the bundle theory is right, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's but the if the bundle theory is true, I don't know what you're saying is dying, but but I would say, like, let's say you're told you're going to die and you're convinced of it. Would you suddenly go, well, maybe I'll take those 5 mushrooms now? Like, what do I have to lose? Or what would you say? Or do you think you would be changed? Or do you think that you would, because there is an instant route to this stuff, like
I just want
you always can instantly.
I just want to point something out, which is that, so I mentioned that I'm a constructivist about observables, I said, but I mean, I suppose we shouldn't assume that there's too much common ground here, because like I still talk about truth and knowledge about observables. It's just, I'm going to be understanding those in a way that's different from like standard correspondence theories of truth. So yeah, I am happy to say that I know I'm going to die. As for the mushroom example, I think if I was like, if it was literally like I'm going to die tomorrow, then yeah, I might as well give the mushrooms a shot. Although, I don't know, would I? Maybe I'd have a bad trip. I don't know if I'd want my last day to be a bad trip. I might try to do things that I enjoy instead. I'm not sure. I just prefer not to think about it. That's my usual.
It's funny that the dosage and the way the session is conducted, it controls heavily for you. Like, it can be steered in a very specific way. But I was going to say that even the people who had really uncomfortable trips still gained the lack of a fear of death, like the lack of death anxiety.
Okay.
That was very interesting about it, is that even the people who had this, so I mean, you think about, like, you're going to sit for 6 months and just recursively sort of rehearse your doom or whatever, like, because maybe you can't control your thoughts.
I've been doing that for like 30 years. So, well, maybe not 30, but 25 years.
Yeah, I know. So. When you were 7, you were like keep rehearsing your doom.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
At
terrified.
7?
Yep, younger than 7. I would have been 5 or 6. I remember running up to my parents' bedroom. They were together at the time, and I remember like going in and being like, I'm going to die. I will die one day. And of course they were like, no, you're not going to die. And no, I was like, no, I mean, one day I'm going to stop existing. I won't be here anymore. And I was terrified. And they tried to give me the usual stuff about, well, everybody goes to heaven when they die and all this, but I didn't believe it. And there was nothing they could do to comfort me. So maybe that, and I've had that ever since I was a kid. So I have been thinking about this for a long time already.
And it persists, right?
Mm. Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah. I'm like.
Yeah. This.
I when I think about death, I have I don't even know how to put it into words. It's like an overwhelming sense of just dread and terror that is. It's unlike any other fear. And I mean, it's physically unlike it. It's very strange because when I have a panic attack, my heart rate increases. When I think about death, when I like really think about it, like I'm talking, maybe at night when I'm about to go to sleep and I'm not distracted by other stuff like I am here. Like when I'm really thinking about death, my heart rate decreases. So there's definitely a significant difference in the type of fear that I'm experiencing, and the death fear is, I mean, it's I don't know. It's like hits me in my core, and it just shakes everything. And my whole life, I feel, is an attempt to sort of distract myself from that fear. Once I stop doing stuff, like I stop doing this, or if I stop listening to music, or I stop working on a project. Once I'm not doing anything, the fear comes in, and you know, it's not pleasant.
You know, also, I'm giving away a big Zen secret now. All the Zen koans are about death. All of them are about death. And see, this this is why, I mean, it's almost kind of like a compassion thing, but like the the mystical experience really is you. It's like dying before you die. It's like dying before you die because you're stripped of everything that you could ever say was meaningful to you, and you're removed. It's just all taken away from you. But what's amazing is that when that happens, so the ego is destroyed, your memories are just gone, sensory, it's just all just thrown away. And what's encountered is like the most perfect peace and like impossible happiness like you've ever imagined, like impossible to imagine. That's why that atheist lady was saying she was bathed in God's love made of nothingness. Like you encounter this, and then you come back to Cain B and his normal eccentricities and, like, you know, problems and neuroses and things, and you have the sense of, why the hell was I ever doing this? Like, what was this all about all this time? Like, this entire time I was just like, it was like you woke up from a horrible dream and you're just like, wait, what? Like, I was telling myself a story about oblivion that was actually a metaphysical story, not an empirical one. So, meaning this metaphysical idea of oblivion and what it will be like to be stripped of everything, instead of empirically being the witness of what it's like to be stripped of everything, including the witness itself, and seeing if that is really what your metaphysical worry is. Like, are they equivalent? But the only way you're going to know is if you empirically investigate it, as opposed to metaphysically imagine nothingness and oblivion that you've never encountered.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that sound ridiculous?
No, I totally buy that it could probably help. So you don't have to. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me. I don't think that I'm likely to actually bother putting in the work, which maybe just is kind of irrational, but you know,
it doesn't matter. You know, one of the great things about what Zen acknowledges to in awakening is that you don't have to put in the work. When I was 14, I didn't put in any work. I was, you know, thought James Randi was it. What?
Well, so
I'm just saying, yeah,
how
yeah.
am
So
I going to...
I didn't. I'm just saying, you want to accidentally have it sober, is what you're saying. It can happen. I'm just saying it. Okay. My first encounter of it was completely accidentally, and you know, I'm just saying, like, you should never rule out that it won't occur by happenstance.
Oh well, that would be very nice.
Which would be, yeah. You know,
that would be cool. Maybe, I don't know actually.
Yeah. What if it would be cool?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it probably would be. No, I'm just sort of thinking, because I do feel to some extent like my fear of death is a very powerful motivator in making me do stuff that's quite valuable. So I'm not sure. I don't know. Would I be better off losing it? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, Kane, I should probably get going. We probably talked for like 5 hours, or
Okay.
but one time we should do something on. We should do one about art, because like there's a lot to say about like avant-garde art and sort of like the Eastern philosophy's influence on the actual practice and activity of art.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ellen Perlman wrote this beautiful book, Nothing and Everything: The Influence of Buddhism on the American Avant-Garde.
Okay, I haven't read
And yeah, it's just, there's a lot of things to talk about, just about like how much conceptual art has to do with the influence of Zen across all fields. So it's not just Cage, it's also in the visual mediums, and it's actually a really sort of widespread influence, that those things sort of happen concurrently, like they in parallel with, and they were influencing one another. And even Zen was influenced by avant-garde art too. Like it was like a mutual influencing, not just it was bi-directional.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be fun if you ever wanted to do a talk like that was more like about aesthetics and art and things.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to talk about whatever. Yeah. Okay. How I mean, are you happy for this to be uploaded? Do you have a preference?
Well, I always like to watch it again.
Okay.
Like I'll watch it one more time, and I have a YouTube channel I'm setting up, and it'll probably be up in like a week or so. So maybe it could be the release could be coordinated with when my YouTube channel goes up.
Yeah, sure. Just
if that would be okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
All right then.
All right. It was nice meeting you.
You too. Goodbye.